This special meeting of the Judson Board of Trustees is hereby called to order at 6:10 p.m. I'm very pleased that we've all taken time to be here this evening, and in compliance with Texas State Government Code on open meetings, tonight's agenda has been appropriately posted. We have established a quorum, and we will begin. Patricia?
Okay, thank you. Thanks, guys. Good to see you again. I thought what we would do is just, I only have this slide up, but we're not going to review everything, but I do want to make sure we dive into a little bit of the work that we didn't quite finish up yesterday. But I also wanted to put in front of you, way back when we had created these board agreements, and so just wanted to put them back in front of you. I neglected to put them in your binders, so I wanted to put them back there and just make sure that we were still good with these. We're still trying to lean in on those. I think we had such really great dialogue yesterday about a lot of different things. Some things surfaced up around procedure and process. Some of that is operating. Some of that I hope will be ironed out once this framework is all in place. And then I think there's ways that we could visit some of that process in a way that where we lean in and maybe improve them, just to make sure that those processes that we have are, they're inclusive, they're transparent, they work for everyone, right? Because what we don't want to do is, we don't want to create a space in the boardroom where you can't have healthy dialogue around these really important issues. And I think including with that dialogue with your superintendent, with your superintendent's team, all of that, where we can have really healthy dialogues where you can ask questions and you can feel confident that you're going to get those answers. And I think that's going to be really productive for this board because, regardless of how we structure the agenda, which I think there's some processes we can talk about around that too, you still have to be able to understand each of those elements. You have to be able to have a space where you can ask questions. And what I saw yesterday and what I've seen in the past too, is grounding those questions in this framework, grounding them in how does that improve outcomes? How are these expenditures? How are these strategies? How are these all impacting our students and trying to make those linkages, which I thought you all did an excellent job yesterday, and the team did such a great job of answering those questions and making those connections. And to me, that is exemplary board work. That is exemplary board work. So what I'd love to do is kind of finish up the framework that we've started, and then if you'd like to, we can revisit that process around agenda review, around operating procedures, around additional work sessions, and we can it's probably time to look at your operating procedures anyway, and just review those and go through that. So does that sound like a fair solution?
Yeah.
And I think we can get to it relatively fast too. So it's not gonna, I don't want it to linger either. I don't want 6 months. Hopefully it won't be 6 months before we see each other again, right? So I just put those board agreements in because I do think that is a great way of just grounding ourselves and saying this is how we want to have this dialogue. This is how we want to have productive dialogue. And I think that's really important. So put it back in front of you. Should have put it in your notebooks. My bad. And so then I thought we'd go through, and I've given you some copies. I just wanted us to review the board constraints. So it's a draft. I gave you a sheet. I didn't make a slide for it. I just figured we could look at the sheets and make sure that this is where you want it to land. So these are the ones you guys brought up. The first one is the board will not be involved in the day-to-day operations, district management of the district. And there's an option here that's just worded a little differently. The board, either collectively or through actions of individual board members, shall not give or appear to give operational advice or instructions to district staff. It's a little more, it might be a little more wordy, you may not want it, that's fine. I put it in there because that's an option I've seen in other boardrooms when it's around the same type of thing. So we can look at that. Anybody want to have any thoughts around that? Questions? Is that still a constraint, a board constraint that you feel is important? Mm-hmm. And remember, these board constraints are the constraints on the board. They don't have progress measures or anything. Yes, sir.
I like that. I think when Ms. King and I were discussing some of the points, the nucleus of this was what we wanted to ensure we didn't go outside of our bounds, that there was some constraint. But this extra piece, letter A, the only thing that I would want to have us discuss or just be cognizant of the fact is that on our own website, there is a Texas Education Code that permits for the board to have direct engagement about operations of the district. We're not to direct personnel, but we certainly can talk about it in a healthy, productive environment. So I wouldn't want this to take away from that directive that's been given by the state to enable that two-way dialogue to occur. So that would be my only reservation with this. In principle, we can't get involved in the day-to-day management. We shouldn't. But we should always have an understanding of what's happening. And that's what I say is the only thing to be careful on that. And so that's why I want to have that discussion.
Fair enough. Anybody else feel differently?
More of a question. So how does a highly effective board delineate or differentiate between directing day-to-day operations and then respectfully inquiring about the outcomes of the operations?
Well, I think that's within the board venue, right? It's within your board room, within your board, and in conversations with your superintendent, you certainly can ask any of about the results, right? What is the impact of this? How are we doing? That's something that is way within your purview. I think it's when you get out and it, whether it's an individual or, as a board, you start to direct the operations or say, this is how you must do it. Like if your superintendent and their team came to you and said, we're not making our goal here, we're off track, right? So what are you going to do about it? And your superintendent came to you and said, here are 3 strategies, and one includes a curriculum, and one includes a tutoring, and then you start to say, well, you need to use this curriculum or this tutor and company. That's when you really get into that directing as opposed to asking questions like, why do you recommend this tutoring company, or why do you rate? Does that make sense? Then answer your question?
Yes, ma'am. So stay away from at the tactical level, keep it at the goal and higher end strategy level.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely when it gets to the tactics, that is your superintendent's purview, right? And so this is just wording. To me, the way you have it, board will not be involved in the day-to-day operations of the district. It says what you want to say. It's just pretty broad. It's pretty broad. So we can think about that. I don't know that it would violate your, or I'm not sure that would preclude your concern.
Now, are you familiar with the exact verbiage of that education code?
I can't recall.
I'm going to read just the beginning of it, just so we all are on the same page. But it's Texas Education Code 11-1513, and it stipulates, the employment policy may not restrict the ability of a school district employee to communicate directly with a member of the Board of Trustees regarding a matter relating to the operation of the district. Then there's a little bit more subchapter stuff, but bottom line is that sort of protects employees and their ability to engage with us. And so, again, not to direct, that is clear, but when you see the appear to give operational advice, our instruction, as long as we understand that if we're having discussion and, all of a sudden, for example, we have too many kids after school, maybe we should look at summer programs. I'm not directing that they should, but it's just an idea that I have, and all of a sudden, I don't want to be accused of, hey, you told them we could. I didn't tell. All I'm saying is maybe that's one thing to think about. Clearly we have to make that decision, and the superintendent and the board. But that's that area that's real gray. As long as we understand that we're not directing them, go find more summer programs. That's distinctly off limits. But anyway, that's what I want to be clear about.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. It's a good point. Are you guys comfortable with just leaving it in the words that are in 1, knowing that you guys know what it means to you, as opposed to having that option?
I actually prefer the option because it's a little more specific, and these constraints should be something that the public can look at as well, and know what we're trying to do. And Mr. Macias, I think that education code is there for the protection. I see it a little differently than you. I see it there as a protection for employees who reach out to us, and not the other way around. Because it says employees shall not be prohibited. So I think we need to be really careful using that particular language to justify reaching out to, say, one of the assistant superintendents to have a discussion about something. My feeling is that should always go through the superintendent and say, Dr. Ball, I have questions about this. Can you answer it? Or can you have, we set up a meeting, or can we do a conference call with whoever the assistant superintendent is about that thing, rather than me just picking up the phone and calling, say, Dr. Fields directly. And so I think that's the difference in that particular piece of education code.
I can see that point of view, and typically when I've encountered this, it's if I'm meeting with a teachers union, or if I have, things in that circumstance. Sometimes, like, for example, when I went to Judson Middle School yesterday, I talked to the principal, and I just asked, how is the summer programming, how's the after-school programming going? And she said, well, we eliminated boys and girls some time ago, and there are some kids that kind of just hang around. We got to kind of move them along. And anyway, that's where that kind of dialogue comes. There was nothing wrong with that interaction.
No.
But I certainly, I can see your point of calling. No, we don't call employees directly.
Right.
It's only if that engagement happens naturally that there shouldn't be because it's always been in my history, and I'll hear it from other districts. Don't talk to the board. Don't talk to them. Don't say anything to them. Yeah, but it's an unwritten rule, but it shouldn't be. There should be no barriers. We're all on the same team, so we're all working together. Naturally, I will always encourage an employee that has a grievance or an issue to go through their processes. We don't handle that stuff, but it never hurts to be informed of concerns. That way we can lend our policy lens to, is there some issues with it?
Yeah, no, and absolutely, and I think as long as you're channeling, those, when they do reach out to you, into the right pathway.
I would agree with Ms. Canoyer. I don't want to call the phone and say, hey, no, it's not.
And maybe the part that here too that seems a little gray too is or appear. So maybe if it's just give operational advice or instructions to the district staff. That would, to me, indicate like you picked up the phone and said, you need to do it this way, which it would definitely be a violation of.
We wouldn't want to do that.
Of your rule, right?
I wasn't going to bring it up, but since Mr. Macias did.
This is our forum to discuss it, of course.
The appear part is the tricky part. The exact same conversation that you were talking about, I had it with Ms. Worley, but it was interpreted differently.
Oh, was it? Interesting.
So that is why that part is so tricky, is the only word I can think of, because all of y'all are board members, that when you have a conversation with the staff, they take it a lot of times in a different way. I see exactly how you meant it and how you said it, but in somebody else's mind, it was like, he asked me about after-school programs, and I really don't have one right now, so I think he left upset, and I'm gonna have to, and
I
I was
was
like.
not even upset, it's not her fault.
Right, but I'm just saying that part, how it appears to somebody else, because people do get nervous. Just like when people get nervous and they say, well, Dr. Ball's gonna retaliate or Dr. Ball's mad at me. I'm not, but they think, same thing with the board member. And I said, Ms. Worley, I said, no, sorry.
You don't have to out her or anything, but I get the
I
sense
just
of that.
said, they understand the Boys and Girls Club ended their contract with us.
Yes.
I said, it's not that we ended it. I said, one day we hope to get it back when their finances are better and we can work things up. I said, no, you did nothing wrong. Everything is okay.
She's all good.
So,
But I do hate that she would have had that impression, because obviously I have no authority over her actions. You do, not me.
And I just think it's because most people want to please. The principals really want to please people. They do. And I don't think that anybody does anything to, upset them or be mad or anything like that. But because they want to do the very best, they're like, oh no, did I do something to let anybody down?
And
it's a board member.
Right.
Which,
You're right, and that's about positional power.
yes.
And so you do have to be aware as a board member, whenever you walk into a campus or into a function where there are educators or team members, that whether you're walking in going, I'm just a community member, I just want to do what's right for my community, but you still have positional power because you are a board member. And so I think it's just important to remember that as you walk in, right or wrong, that you accept that is the nature. When they, if they see you walking down the hall, they're gonna, want to make sure that they give you a very good impression, and not that you're in there to try and catch them at anything, right? So I think it's a fine line between having the community, being able to engage in your community and engage with your educators and your students and your parents and all of that, and appearing like you are dictating policy or practice on those campuses and classrooms. But there's always going to be that line, and you are the only ones that are going to need to know where the line is, right, and recognize that line.
Well, and just so we can close this too, my need for this information was because I do plan to bring it up at a board meeting, and I do plan to ask for funding to programming that would be summer or after school related. I probably will pick up the phone and call the Boys and Girls Club and see what we're doing in District 4 and why they vacated. Just kind of reintroduce, hand it off to Dr. Ball once I do that, and see if there's opportunity, which is just me taking leadership as a leader in my district to ensure that we're meeting the needs in the community. Had Ms. Worley told me that we have great after-school programs and every student is seen, then I was under a different impression. This is good information to know. So it's informational, but I appreciate you bringing it up, Dr. Ball, because I don't want to come across that way, and I might need to just remind myself that that's how it can be interpreted. But
Yeah.
that's more or less why.
And I will say that in the framework that we're building, if out of school time or after school time is important to you, then you need to put it into the board work, meaning you need a superintendent constraint around it so that you have a venue to bring in that into your budgeting conversations, into your, otherwise it feels very out of scope. Does that make sense? So that's why we build this framework. So we all know what we're working on and what is the priorities. And so, if that is something that is important, which a lot of people have those kind of extracurricular or out of school time constraints to try and, that's fine, but then we need to create it. We need to bring it into
Can you say more about that? 'Cause, so I'm not seeing that here. But I think, in my mind, I would say, well, some of these are broad enough that you could draw the through line to, after-school programming or athletics or things like that. So,
Social emotional too.
right, yeah. So is it that we would need, like, I'm curious as to why that would be needed to be called out specifically.
Well, it's not that it precludes you from having those conversations, but what it does, it depends on your level of how high up you put it in the priorities.
Okay.
Right? So that's where you want to build. You want to have, if you want like consistent reporting on something, and you want to be able to align a revenue line with an impact, then you probably need to lift it up into it. If it is something that you're just interested because you think it's an important part of the deal and you want to hear maybe a report on it, but you're not going to track it, you're not really looking at it from a fiscal responsibility, that it's just part, because there's going to be a lot of those things, right? A lot of layers. And you are not, as a board, going to be able to track every one of those layers. You're going to have to trust that your superintendent is tracking and doing all of those. But if it's important enough for you, then you need to lift it up into board work. But as we say,
By way of the constraints.
by way of constraint, but just like the goals, you can have 5, no more than 5. It becomes too much reporting, too much of a burden, right? And you can't track it if it gets more than that. And those can be part of that. Could be like a school culture one where you have a CPM that talks about the number of after-school programs will increase such and such. So when we get to the superintendent constraints, we can re-look at those, and I gave you some sheets and some additional examples as well, so that we could talk through that. So we'll just, maybe we can table this, or maybe what we can do is say, how many of you would want to leave the words "or" appear to give operational advice? Or first of all, let's see, how many want to have just one, the way it's written, or A, option A? So just number 1, show of hands, how many really are leaning towards that?
With or without the option?
Without the option.
Oh.
Okay, so 1, trustee Diaz.
We're voting to leave it the way it's written here?
Yeah,
You're
without
voting
the
on either
option.
1 or A.
So if we go with the option, which includes a peer, then the standard of care is shifted to us. That is based on somebody's subjective view of what a peer means, or what we say.
Yeah.
I can say something that's completely unrelated, but if somebody hears or thinks that I'm giving them a directive, then that triggers that.
Right.
So the standard of care shifted to
Just to you.
onto me based on somebody's subjective view of what I'm saying.
So the other choice would be to have option A without the appear words in it.
Yeah. I'm
Which
gonna
I
go
agree with that, too.
You like
I'm
that?
gonna go without,
Yeah.
You wanted that one.
Yeah.
without a peer.
How do the rest of y'all feel?
I'm reading
Okay,
both
that's-
options without, but A without a peer.
When you say appear, I mean, that's somebody's
It can look,
interpretation.
any type of way. It's kind of scary.
Regardless, it's still on you guys, right? It's not on the staff or the team,
Because that right
because
there.
they don't have the positional power. You do.
Falls directly into what Jose and Dr. Ball were just discussing. It appeared to the principal that he was basically, upset. Well, she say upset. They say that a lot around here, I found out. That he was upset because the program is not there, when that's not what happened. He was just asking, hey, do y'all have one? You don't? Okay. Because now he can use his position to bring it to the board as a question for all the schools for the program. Because it came out of all of them, basically.
And there's a difference between gathering information and directing. And so I would see this more in a gathering information, but we just have to be aware that there is still positional power. So there is still, a principal may not see that as gathering.
And I noted that. I'll definitely be much more aware of that.
Because you have to give credit to the way she received it.
Yeah, 'cause I-
Although she
yeah.
didn't intend,
Yeah.
but that was her perception.
Right.
And perceptions are real to the person that.
Sure, absolutely.
And I think it happens a lot more than we think of.
Oh, yes, it does.
Well, back to the idea, take out the appear, I mean, we know we need to police ourselves too, and we understand that we cannot direct personnel other than Dr. Ball, really, in terms of anything, so.
So we have two that are okay without the words appear.
Yeah,
You're
the
okay with
thing.
that as well?
Are you okay
I
with
thought,
or
I thought
without?
Mr. Eaton was
Without,
okay
without.
without.
Oh, trustee Eaton, I'm sorry, you
Yeah,
were,
because
okay.
that leaves it up to somebody else's interpretation,
Yeah, you don't,
and that's not fair.
Okay.
that can be anything.
How are you guys feeling?
I think it should.
I would rather somebody ask me what was my intent than just assume that because that's making an assumption that I meant one thing when, it probably wasn't even what it was.
Right. So it sounds like your preference was maybe to leave that in.
I can go either way.
Okay.
I think though that like if we take it out, we need to have an understanding of how we are perceived on a daily basis by many people.
And I just think it's natural, and what do you call it, positional power?
Mhm.
I think that's natural. I don't think there's anything unusual for principals to feel that way when we show up on my campus. They aim to please.
Mhm.
It's just awareness, being aware that when you walk onto a campus that you hold that. And that, I don't feel strongly one way or another. I think you understand what the appear words mean, and I think that's, I am not a big fan of subjective language in these kind of things, so I do think it feels a little subjective. But I wanted to put it in front of you because you might feel differently. Right now, what I think we have is 4 that are okay with it, 1 that could go either way, and 1 that would rather leave the language in, and
I can go either
You
way.
can
Ultimately, it's up to us to make sure we're policing our behavior, and I'm not sure that the word appear to is going to change
right.
anyone's actions in here. I just think we're going to need to be cognizant that it may come across that way to people. I know that when our teachers and our staff see a board member, they do want to do what Dr. Ball said. They are deferential. They don't want to do anything that gets anybody in trouble. And they see us, which I've worked really hard, to be one of those friendly people you can come and talk to. But they do see us as having a position of power that they can get in trouble. And we want to be really, really, really careful about what we say and what we do when we're there by ourselves with a staff member.
And I think that's the spirit of this, right? You understand who you are, where you are, what you're elected to do, and as long as you're not in there trying to tell folks how to do things, what to do, or undermine your superintendent, then that's the spirit of what this constraint is about.
Can we go back to something else that Mr. Macias said really quickly? Because I've been kind of thinking about that too. Mr. Macias said something about reaching out to Boys and Girls Club himself. I wouldn't think to do that. I would think that I would call Dr. Ball and say, hey, can you reach out and see what's going on with them? What's the feeling about something like that? I don't know that that's, then you said information gathering, and I can see it as that, but I just want to be really careful about I don't overstep and get involved. What do you think about that?
Well, did you have a...
Well, I think, and he said this, I would be going to them as a representative of my district to find out, hey, is there something that we could do in the district to bring y'all back, or did something happen, or, because everybody it's funding, maybe there's something that we can do to help. So as him going out asking about it for his district, I don't see anything wrong with that.
And I will add, just for the sake of the conversation, you know, we are supposed to be interacting with our city representative, our state representative, our county, and in a lot of conversations, that type of stuff occurs. What do you need in your district? What's going on? And when I say district, I don't think of all Judson. I think what's going on in my district.
Right.
And so when I do talk with folks, I even talk to communities and schools. I reached out to them and I wanted some fact-finding information a long time back and spoke with Jessica. I wanted to understand what the nonprofit is. I'm doing my fact-finding, and then obviously if I feel it's important in mine, we either all talk about it or I'll ask Dr. Ball, I'm interested in it. If you want to take a look at it, you know, take a look at it and let me know what you think. And then obviously she'll tell me yay, nay, no way, or whatnot, or talk to us. But it's a matter that we're talking about it, and I think that's important for us to do. We're not here to just react. We need to be proactive in our work as board members.
I think
And
there's.
you never know when an opportunity might come up. I was at an event with Tommy Calvert, and, you know, he came over, he knows I'm on the Justice School Board, and this event didn't have anything to do with school districts or anything. It was a political thing. But he asked me, he was like, hey, how things going in Judson? And I'm like, hey, we're doing great, but, you know, if you guys can help us with some funding for after-school programs, it'd be really great. You know, I don't want to miss out on the opportunity by just turning around and saying, oh, it's going great, but call the superintendent, she can tell you. You know what I'm saying? Because, yes, now he can call her and say, hey, we got funding for Judson's after-school programs, you know?
Candlewood got a program.
I'm just saying, I wouldn't want to miss out on an opportunity like that.
So I think that there's a line, right? And you guys have to recognize the line. There's a difference between being at an event and having a conversation and learning more about an opportunity that could impact children in your district. And when I say district, I talk all district. And finding and fact finding and finding out information, or going to a conference, an education conference, and hearing another district talk about some really cool program that helped improve impact, and bringing that information back and sharing it. That is actually part of your role, right? Is advocacy for your district, advocacy for your children. That is like really important and critical, because you guys, through your conference and through your peer network with other board members, might hear about these things, just like Superintendent Ball as a peer network, that she's hearing about things that she might bring back and say, hey, we think this might be really helpful here in Judson. So that is, you know, that one is over here on this side of the line. When you get to the crossing over the line is, because you guys know this, is I'm not telling you anything you don't know, that there are going to be people out there that are going to contact you because they want to do work with the district. That's just the world we live in, right? It is just, that's the way. So you have to, it is on you, all of you, that you hold your line, that you are not negotiating for Judson ISD with any contractor. That is not your job.
Yeah.
That is not your job.
100% agree.
And that's
Right?
well
so-
understood.
Plus, we don't have the authority.
So you have to, I think maybe Trustee Macias, like making that phone call, if the phone call is, you got a buddy that's working over here and you say, hey, what's going on? How come you had to pull your programming here, you know? And then you get some information, you go, oh, okay, well, I understand that. Now you're more informed. That's one thing. If you get to a point where you're saying, what could we do to help you out of this situation, might be perceived as obligating the district in a space where you can't do it.
I don't have that authority. My interactions are informational. It takes a body plus a superintendent really to make things happen. So I just see the work I'm doing as, again, I never represent everyone. I can't. I'm just interested as Jose Macias District 4 board member, and there's some middle schools in my district that really could use some support. So tell me a little bit about what Boys and Girls Club are doing. And I'm just using it as an example. It could be anybody that's doing after school or summer programming, just so that I'm informed about what they're doing and move forward.
And I understand where you're coming from. I think that once again, the line is gonna be, and it is on you guys to make sure you stay, don't go over the line, right? Is that even if you are even if you are just having this conversation because you are fact gathering, like in the instance that you spoke, hey, how can we support you to get you back in? You want to be careful that they don't perceive that not that you meant this, but that they don't perceive, oh, you just opened the door for me, right? So it's just you're just being careful. It's not like this isn't being faced by every trustee in every district everywhere. You go to those conferences. Who's sponsoring those conferences?
Yes.
They're not being sponsored by. They're being sponsored by vendors. There is a reason behind that, right? This is just the reality of the world that we live in, and any elected official lives in, that has budgetary power, right? It just is. So I'm just saying that we have to, so in answer to your question, is there's a line, right? There's a line between gathering information that you think could benefit your district and the children in your district, and sharing that with your board or with your superintendent and negotiating or even appearing to negotiate on behalf of this district. Does that make sense? Does that help answer your question a little bit?
I would like to ask Mr. Macias, why do you make a distinction between just the district that you represent and the entire district?
Because fundamentally, elected governance means that I was elected by a certain group in my community, which is District 4, which means to me I have a responsibility to serve that community. I don't yield my authority to anyone on this board. I'm the one accountable, and as a result, I'm going to take action for that accountability. So when it's time for re-election, I can say A, B, C, and D were done, and I didn't just wait passively to see what the collective board did. I did my job, and that's experience. I mean, you serve your community. I serve everyone in Judson, but my accountability is at District 4. Because District 1 can't elect me, neither can District 3 or 2, just District 4. And so at the end of the day, I need to make sure that I'm doing my work. That's why I have that sort of governance approach to it.
And we make campaign promises.
Yeah, you guys are at large, you and Mr. Diaz. So I see this being your lens is broader, but we have districts so that we can ensure that people are represented at this table. Otherwise, we would all be at large, and we're not.
No, we're not.
There are reasons we have districts, and you should know that because of the underserved. So that's why I represent my district the way I do.
Jose, how do you reconcile that with the inability to enact policy or make budgetary decisions only for your district?
I respect that it has to still be collective, but I still have to do my work. So at the end of the day, my resolution is if I've done my work and I've brought forth opportunities for the whole board to discuss, and there's no support for it, say it doesn't go anywhere, say the superintendent evaluated, it doesn't work, then I fundamentally have to go back and say, this is what we tried, it didn't work because of A, B, C, and D, or it didn't work because we have a different strategic process we're looking at, whatever that might be. But I have to be able to go back and tell my community, I heard, I did something about it, this was the net result, and this is why. Otherwise, that's how I reconcile it. Because you're right, I can't promise anyone business, and I don't. I make sure people are very clear that that's not my final say. It is all of our discussion and input.
Yeah.
And how
I
do
mean,
you-
think about it. When you receive phone calls, you basically can receive phone calls from any of the people in the Judson because you're at large. But normally when I receive a phone call about a concern from a parent, it's from one in my district.
Sure. That's slightly, for me, right, respecting, and I hear you.
Mm.
And it's slightly different because receiving the phone calls from the folks that specifically believe and I am their member for whatever reason, right?
Mhm.
Is one thing. But knowing that I cannot make any, I talk too damn much all day. Knowing that I cannot make any specific changes to a district. There is no way for any of us to make specific funding
Right.
line items.
Right.
To our campuses, right? So like I hear how you're reconciling it. So how do you propose to move forward if one of your policy ideas may be detrimental to Tanya's district?
Well, we wouldn't, and that's why we would talk collectively. We would have to ensure that we're still being equitable to all our students, and that would be naturally the answer. I'll give you one example just to give you. Our kids came to our district. I advocated for it. I asked the superintendent, which was Montoya at the time, please look at this program. I think Dr. Ball inherited the program. It was set, but I pleaded, please have one in my district, and Elof was one of the schools. I think it eventually went district-wide, but that's me advocating for my campus, which is Elof, and again, it was good for the whole district. That was a successful example, but there may be many more that are not, and that's where we get back to your point. If it's not good for everyone because it doesn't make sense, then it's just the reality. But I can tell you 9 out of 10 times, if it's good for District 4, it's probably good for the whole district.
So how do you reconcile that with our equity-based approach to ensure that we appropriate resources where needed, right? So we already know what happens. Like Suzanne's district may not need certain things that Deborah's district may need, right? There's a
or Ms.
reality to our
King's.
district.
Oh,
Right,
yes,
that-
it is.
That TPC Parkway is gonna need less resources.
Sure.
So how does your approach to governance honor and elevate the equity-based lens that we're collectively trying to get to?
Well, I don't fully understand your question, but I'm going to give it a shot.
So, like from my point of view, and I'm not,
Yeah.
it's not a judgment statement, right? But your approach seems heavily centered on your specific district.
Mhm.
That could be at odds with an equity-based approach. If you're just fighting for your district, are you conceding on the needs of others if you get your way? That sounds more crass than I intended to. Is that-
Well, no, I take no offense. Honestly, again, I will say again, I have to be cognizant of my district. I just have to be. That's just the nature of the District 4 for me. But I will always look at the lens of the entire district. And I do believe in our equity vision that we talked about as a board. We need to be equitable across the district. So if I'm advocating for something in District 4, I probably would like to see it across the district. I think District 4 is really a microcosm because we have some that are economically disadvantaged in my district, and we have some areas that are affluent within District 4. So it's a microcosm of all of Judson ISD. So I see it applicable the whole way through. But again, I'm also going to respect that it's not my decision, it's all of our decisions. If we decide not to go forward with it, that's that. We just move forward and try to figure out how we can make things work out.
And I think that the history of, there's some really interesting readings that I'm happy to share, but the history of single-member districts is about representation. And that's the reason that districts have been sued that are all at large, and there's a reason that there are hybrids. There are the reasons that the big urbans are single-member all the way across. So, but representation doesn't negate equity, and equity is across the entire district, right?
Absolutely.
So you can represent District 4 as long as you're not trying to appropriate more for District 4
Right.
than for District 1.
Agreed.
You see what
I
and
totally
so
agree.
that's where the rub is, right? And so when we bring it into the board conversation, I think it's important to make note that if there isn't equitable resources, if there isn't equitable materials, if there isn't equity in all forms across the district, which very few districts have that, right? Yet, a lot of are striving for it, then you represent your district to make sure they're at the table for that conversation, but not to the detriment of someone else or some other child.
Right.
And it's important to remember that these are children, and they are all our children, right? So I think that's how that conversation can play into board conversations, right? It doesn't, you're right, you are elected. You're elected either in your district or you're elected at large, And, the nature of politics means you probably had to, had some conversations with your electorate that moved and said, this is important to me. This is the legacy I want to leave behind. This is the story I want to tell. And once again, those are fine. And honoring them, of course, is incredibly important as long as it's not to the detriment of all of the children in this district. And so that's how I would bring that into board work. I don't know if that helps with your question. Yeah, no, I think it's a fair dialogue and it's a fair question because you hear it a lot, right? My district, single member, at large, who's better, what's the better model, what's the, all of those things. But I think we have to go back to the root, which is, do all of our children have representation at this table?
And I just want to make a clarification to Jose. In 2015, when I first got elected, communities and schools, you had, I think already had gotten, or it was on the agenda for community and schools to be at Metzger. And Metzger needed that. And I remember dissenting the vote because I had done a little bit of research, not a whole lot, but I had done a little bit of research on communities and schools. And I saw what it did in elementary school.
I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
Oh, I needed to.
I'm sorry.
I saw what communities and schools was doing for elementary, and I did not see anything on what they were doing in middle schools, but your concern was middle school. I was a dissenting vote because you only wanted it at one place, and I thought if it was that important to be a program for Metzger, then why didn't we have 4 other middle schools? Why wouldn't the other 4 middle schools get a piece of that funding for communities and schools? And so that's why I dissented, and that's also the reason why I'm asking the question about your distinction between what you want in your district versus the entire.
Just leave it on.
Yeah, I guess.
So I think that that's a good dialogue to have. It's not necessarily, we're getting a little bit off of our topic, so I'm going to pull us back in. But I think it is a reminder to, and there are board constraints around this too, but I think it is a reminder to all of us is that if you are going to state that you want equity in your district, then you have to represent equity. You have to actually, and it needs to be demonstrated in the programs and the resources and all of that, regardless. And that should show up in your board work as well, which I'm sure it does. So, we're going to move on. I think what we've got is that this language on this one board constraint is good, and we're going to take out the appear part. And so that's what I understood.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That was
Okay.
majority.
So then we're going to go to number 2. The board shall not spend less than 50% of its total board work time discussing student goal progress and superintendent constraints. I think that's pretty self-explanatory, but that goes to what I said earlier, is if it's high up on your priority list, then we need to bring it into board work because then it counts as this 50%. If it's not included in board goals or constraints, essentially, then if you talk about it, it's outside of the framework and it's outside of the 50%. Does that make sense?
So I guess I want to understand this, obviously, because I have input on this one. So 50% of our board meeting, you're saying, should be focused on student goals and progress, and 50% can be on anything else? Is that what?
Well, 50% should be on your other board work, right? That's
Yeah.
not about student outcomes or goal
Okay.
progress or student constraints.
The second part of your statement confused me. So if that's fundamentally what you're saying, I think that's a very good constraint to work towards, of course.
So if you were to go back, we didn't have this framework in place, but if you were to go back and review your board meetings, you would not see 50% right now on student outcomes. And there's a tracker that I would give you, and you would track it, and it would delineate So that's,
Well, and that's where then I'll draw a distinction. Our job is about student outcomes, but fundamentally, the other overarching responsibility we have is fiscal management. So if it has anything to do with a dollar being spent, we need to spend time on it. And this last board meeting, we spent time on a $45,000 expenditure, which is small, but we found out, why vendor with 17,000 wasn't selected and why the one at 45 that was 3 times more. Because guess what? It has everything to do with fiscal responsibility. That had nothing to do with academic outcomes. But I would argue, if it has something to do with dollar values, we're going to have to talk about that.
yeah, and that's in the other 50%.
So then you're saying
Unless
only
you can tie
$50,
it.
15, that's really narrow then for anything outside
No,
fiscal.
It's not precluding us from talking about anything. It's saying at least 50% of the time, specifically centered on student outcomes. The remainder of the time, for anything else pertaining to the governance and our actual duties. So it's not going to preclude us from anything. It's just making sure that if we're going to talk about ECI's fiscal stuff, then we need to dedicate equal or more time on student-centered items. And I don't,
As long as we're not restricted.
you're not,
Yeah.
I mean,
No,
that's
in-
the spirit of it.
Nobody's
No
going to
restriction.
restrict you on what you want to talk about, but I'll give you an example too that crosses over, right? So, and I can't remember the exact topic, but it was in your last board meeting, and it was an item that, it was a budgetary item that I think you might have pulled.
It was the smart boards. It was the form of a smart board.
ESL dollars.
I see. The
And-
ESSER funds versus the ESL
Yeah.
money.
And what I will say is when I heard that conversation, I heard the questioning linked to student outcomes.
Because I
heard it
asked
linked-
directly, what will this do
Right.
for academic achievement?
And so that to me is the right way to ask a fiscal question. If you're gonna have fiscal questions, don't just ask about because you're interested in the vendor. I mean, of course you want procurement to be fair, and of course that's important too, and you want fiscal responsibility. But there are ways to talk about the budget and the facilities and all of that. They should be driving student outcomes, right? They're not there just for the sake of there. We're not in the business of adults. We're in the business of children. So how do we, and I know that business is a trigger for a lot of people, so I, reverse that. We're in the interest of our children, right? And so all of that conversation should drive, how are we creating pathways for our kids? How are we creating? And so that, to me, was a very fair way of pulling out a question and saying, you know what? I don't, how are we making sure that the investment we're making is moving our kids in the direction we want them to make?
Yes.
That's a fair question, and it always is a fair question, and it's your job to ask that question. So that, to me, is, I don't want to make you feel like you can't ask those questions. You should be asking them. I'm just saying, keep them always in mind, is how is this helping our kids?
Direction.
And the other part of that is, oftentimes we put this in to remind you, measure progress on outcomes. Every board meeting, you have to measure progress. You have to look at progress, you have to get a report, you have to have a conversation like you guys had yesterday with the team saying, okay, we're at what level? Okay, we seem like we're on track here, we're off track here, what do we need to do? That is good board work, right? And so that's where hopefully the majority of your conversation will be around. Does that make sense? Doesn't mean you can't talk about, you're going to have to talk about things that are adult issues because that's the nature of a school district. I'm just saying, don't spend 100% of your time talking about adult issues and forget to measure progress and impact on children. And that's what this framework does, is it lifts it up into that purview. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I would just echo that a confident community usually supports that we're being fiscally responsible, at least in my experience.
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
A community wants us to be fiscally responsible. Ultimately, that's it.
Of course.
And so if there's the appearance, and this isn't an appearance thing, that we're not, that erodes confidence in our community. And we're recovering from a failed bond. that, was a no tax increase bond that we lost. And part of that sentiment was an erosion of trust that we must rebuild, that we're being smart, that we're watching our money. And I would dare say, even if it doesn't have an academic outcome, if we can validate why we're making these rational choices, it helps.
Yeah.
It helps.
Understandable. So are you guys good with board constraint number 2? Makes sense within this framework?
We're gonna provide Jenny with a stopwatch to measure time.
We're going to be
I caught that.
afterwards. You were over.
The best way to do this is,
I said to Renee yesterday, this is going to be on me. to track
We're gonna need a tracker.
the best way to do it is to
Confidence
put
in you.
times on your minutes.
this. Yes.
Because then you can go, and this is something that I can certainly help you with as well, but
Yeah. No,
we'll
I
give
can
you a
do that.
minute.
I'm kind of forgetful sometimes. That's the thing that's going to
that
happen.
makes
I'm going to have to
12
go
us.
back and do the YouTube and
Yeah,
do
poor
the time
Jenny.
stamp
We
count.
just-
But I can do it.
you know.
I have confidence in myself that I
I
can
mean,
do it.
it's really hard when you get minutes, so a lot of times you do this after the meeting, right? And so then you pull the minutes, and it's like, we started at 6 and we ended at 11, and there's no times in between. So it's awesome when there's times put
Yeah.
in between. Like, we started the consent here and we ended here. We started the non-consent, that kind of thing. And we'll also, I'm sorry, one
No,
second.
go ahead.
On the agenda, we will delineate the student outcome portion of it. Well, like, we're talking about goal 1, goal progress measure 2 and 3. We'll delineate that in the agenda so that it's very obvious that this is when we're talking about progress. Does that make sense? That'll make it easier too.
So when you say add times, you mean ahead of time or?
No, after, as it's happening, what I would do is probably just have a paper copy of the agenda, and then I'd write down, okay, we started talking about this item at this time. We went on to the next item at this time.
But
So
we're
that-
not being constrained on how long we can discuss an
No,
item.
no, I would just report
I
back
just
to the
want
board,
clarification.
okay, today we were more like 40, 60, or something like that, instead, as far as the percent time spent on things.
Okay, I can
Yeah.
understand that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you're holding yourselves accountable. There's nobody else going to hold you accountable to these board constraints. You will hold yourselves accountable, and that'll be part of your board self-evaluation as well.
And I have to share too that sometimes, like the community watches us. If the board meeting's live stream, they've seen the agenda. And sometimes they have a question about a board item, and they may call their board representative and say, hey, can you guys discuss this particular item, because I just need a little clarification on it. Because they don't get all that we get. They just get an agenda and,
No, the board
No,
book
they
is
get
online.
everything,
well,
except for closed
If they
session.
can go look at the agenda, they can look at all that stuff that the
and they
board book
may
is
not
there.
understand what they're looking at, is all I'm trying to say.
I understand, but the
And
board
so-
meetings are for us and not the public.
So why do we live stream it? Why are
Because there
they
is an
invited to
accountability
watch?
of the decisions that we're making, but that doesn't mean that they get to give the input at the meeting.
So they can't ask for clarification on
They can
something?
ask for clarification, that doesn't mean that it all has to be discussed during the meeting. It could be if they have a question about, I'm trying to think of something that somebody might have said, about a program that's going in at a school, for example. And you can say, this is my understanding of it, and this is who you can call if there's more questions that you have.
I will
And
say-
so to have a matter of record on the response, because see, that's always my concern. When I ask a question about something, I want it on the record.
And that's fine, that's why the boards are transparent, right? And I think that, if I have a trustee, I have a school district, right? And so if I have a question and I look at the agenda and I also look at the board constraints, and if I think they're not spending enough time or they haven't talked about a goal in the way that then I would call my trustee and ask that question. And I would expect that question might appear in the board meeting. And I think that's perfectly fine to have that. As long as you're not, a lot of times what we see is it becomes becomes kind of like you're almost getting a script texted. You know, I've
Yes.
seen board members where
And just
that's not
saying yes
beneficial
to everything.
to the impact of the organization. And it is a board meeting to get your business done, right? But clarifying questions, there's nothing wrong about having dialogue in a board meeting around questions, even community questions, right? That's okay as long as it is focused on the
Student outcome.
work, right? The work, right? If it's, if it's about procurement, I think there are important questions, but you need to think about, are those questions coming to you because of something that is outside of a community concern for children, right?
That's fair.
It's just, and that's the line you guys have to walk, right?
I just don't want to feel like, now granted, I'm not the biggest fan of board meetings. Go tell, right? And I'm not trying to stay here till no 1 o'clock in the morning, but I don't want to come in with the attitude of, oh, we got to hurry up through this, so I'll just sit here and vote yes on everything.
I don't think anybody's saying that.
I don't want to feel that way.
Oh, I hope you don't.
Oh, you'd be surprised how y'all make me feel sometimes.
So that goes back to kind of the, your agreements, right? Leaning into your agreements. Every person at this board has been elected to sit at this board table. And so dialogue is productive as long as it remains productive,
Yes.
right? If you start to get, where you are feeling like you can't, I can't have a dialogue or my voice isn't heard, then you have to lean on your agreements. You have to do that as a board, right? It's the same with your staff. As if they come in and present to you, you have to honor them with the same way you would want to be honored, right? Listening intently, not making assumptions, right? Using that information to make your decisions.
Well, I've been chastised for asking the staff questions because I didn't understand something that was being presented. I was chastised for that.
And I'm sorry that was the impact, because that you shouldn't be, right? And so moving forward, I think what we'd like to do is say, this is the framework, this is how we're going to operate in this boardroom, and the questions about things, because we don't all have the same level of expertise
When we
either.
come in here.
No, we
And
don't.
it's
Right.
important to
Right.
recognize that.
Right.
And boards with multiple perspectives
Mhm.
do better. Boards that have all educators aren't always the strongest boards, because it tends to get in the weeds and we stop, so there are a lot of different things about that. So it's just, you guys have such a great mixture of experiences here. Draw on them, right?
And I think, excuse me, I also think that probably we've neglected to do something, because Ms. Eaton brings that up often, and I'm thinking that maybe a solution would be if we were able to have orientation, and it would be a structured orientation for every new board member, so that the things that she has questions about, she would learn that in the orientation. And I don't think everybody had an orientation when they first became a board member. Now, Mr. Macias is our longest tenured board member, so I don't know if he had any orientation, but when I came on in 2015, I did. And I don't think it's been consistent. So I'm thinking that might be something to eliminate different board members telling different people different things, if there was a unified, structured orientation before every board member, after they've been elected.
So that's a really great point, and even within this structure too, there are recommendations of board members onboarding. What does that onboarding look like? And also, thinking about mentoring each other in ways that help support new board members come onto the board, and you've all been new board members, it floods over you, right?
Yeah.
It's like, and so, being able to have those kind of relationships and to learn from each other, I think that's a good policy to have. And a really strong onboarding program is incredibly important. And we talked
Because
about
we
that a
get
little
it,
bit last
you know,
night.
as a new board member, when you go to your very first TASB convention, you have to go to the new board members one. So you're not going to your other classes. That's one thing. But an orientation that is strictly devised for your district, I think that might be helpful, maybe.
And so that's something that we could work on, and you could put it in your operating procedures.
Okay.
So let's go on to 3, which is about board policy and operating procedures. I think this is this is one of those things where, do we need to say this? Do we need to put this in the constraint? But I think it is a good reminder that we have operating procedures, we have policy, and you ought to, review them annually, at least look at them and make sure they're stay up to date. It's very easy for boards to just pull a policy or a legal policy off the shelf, from TASB or whatever, dust it off, put it in and implement it without really making it your own, making it unique to your and contextualized to your district. So I would recommend taking a look if you haven't done the operating procedures in a long time, and it's a few things have been coming up that makes me think and recommend that we ought to spend some time on the operating procedures. So, and then I think you do need to say, we're not going to violate those. We're going to live into them. We made them. We believe in them, and we're going to honor them. Does that make sense? So then your board constraint is about honoring those things that you actually had a hand in writing, as opposed to something that maybe you didn't write. Does that make sense then?
Yeah, because on the last page is a place for all of our signatures.
Right.
So that would mean we would have to agree.
So are we okay with that third board constraint? Anybody opposed? Okay, and then on the 4th one, this is one, I can't remember who wrote this one, but the board, either collectively or through the actions of individual board members, shall not behave in a manner that erodes trust and respect among the team of 8. This goes to a lot of the agreements. I think maybe I think I put this on there. So I'm gonna own that.
Okay.
I put that on there as a suggestion. If you feel like the agreements are not strong enough to hold you into kind of the things that we've talked about, can we honor each other's conversation? Can we have productive dialogue? Can we, respect each other and trust each other that we're not trying to hurt one another? And if you guys feel like the agreements, which I think could do that, I think you don't need this. But I just wanted to put it there because I heard a lot of I've heard it tonight too. Again, conversations about trust and respect of the team of 8, which includes Dr. Ball. So I wanted to put that in there just as a suggestion. That should have been suggested. Sorry. So we can think about that, or we can dialogue that, or we can, does anybody feel like that really strongly that this needs to be a part of the board constraint?
I do.
You feel very
I
strongly?
do, because I think we have a problem with it.
Anyone else? Does anyone feel strongly that it shouldn't be a part of the board constraints?
It's an appropriate item. It's an appropriate item.
I would agree with that.
Okay.
I would ask the measurability on that. I mean, it's obviously, I don't want empty words. I mean, obviously, they need to mean something. I agree that with Mr. Diaz, we certainly need that. But sometimes, I guess, the hard part is finding the venue in which to iron out some of these reasons that erosion would occur. And sometimes they're just not fixable. I mean, I don't know, it's hard, but But I think we need to put that in there. I think every new board member needs to know that. I think that's definitely something we should work towards. And,
I think you're right. They're all, and it's gonna ebb and flow. You know, you're gonna have rough moments and you're gonna have better moments and, you know, but I also think you have to honor each other's and each other's experiences and that will build trust over time as well. So okay, so we're gonna leave that in, and then the only other one was the self-evaluation, which you may not want it every 3 months. I recommend it every 3 months because it talks about, are we moving across and I would share the evaluation tool with you so you could see that. I didn't think we'd have time tonight, and I don't think we will, but I'll send it to all of you so you can either add that or not add it.
Is it in here?
It's,
Oh,
it's very much like the first few pages of the Lone Star Governance Manual, where you start on page 22 and you go through page 30, and it scores. Those numbers at the top are the score numbers.
Renee, when's the last time we did a self-evaluation?
It was last year, yes.
Okay, so it's not too far back.
Yeah, and so we would want you, if you're going to adopt this framework, then you ought to you ought to evaluate yourselves on the framework. And that's where this is the framework. You might want to, and then you would also, you know, are we keeping to our board constraints? How do we feel about that? And they're not necessarily measurable. There's no progress measures on that. And then, you know, you might talk about the agreements. But that's what the evaluation should entail. And I will say that...
Are we good to add that? Is that what you're asking us?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how often do you want to do it?
Every 3 months.
I think we should start with 3 months, and then kind of, we can reevaluate after a year or so, and maybe we could move to 6 months, seeing how things are going, but I agree, that starting with 3 months is a good idea.
So the next time we meet, I hope there's next time we meet, we would do a baseline. We'll do an evaluation together with this instrument as a baseline. You'll do it on your own. I'll send you one, and then we'll come together and we'll compare scores. I'll do one as well on you.
So the baseline we do next time with you, is that going to be for our performance for the last 3 months?
Yes, that'll be your baseline, and you'll see it won't be very high because that's the nature of this, right? And then as we adopt things and live into this framework, your scores will go up exponentially, right? And I will tell you that out of this, I think the total score is 100. I've not seen a board go over 65 yet.
On the baseline or
On
in
any.
general?
On anything. So, just to spur you guys on, you could be the best board in Texas. So, that'd be awesome. All right, I think we probably, so we got the board constraints. Let's take a break. Everybody's up, probably need to get up, shake out legs.
About 10 minutes.
Yes.
The time now is 7:23. We'll take a 10-minute break and return at 7:33. All right, folks.
Cultural experiences.
It's 7:34. We're reconvening. Patricia.
Okay, so we've gone through the board constraints, we're good, so now let's move on to the superintendent constraints. I transcribed what you guys had talked about last night. I also put on this piece of paper that I gave you as well. Thank you. Okay, you're nice. I also put the areas of concern. This was when we talked about this originally. You had these, I found those in my notes. I dug them back up and put that on the top just in case you wanted to refer to them. So we really only came up with 2 because one, I think from you guys, was very similar to number 1, but you had a C level school, rated C and below, and the other one was D and F rated campuses. And then I tried to take your constraint about equity and build it out and put some language, so it may not be exactly what you want, so I want you to do that. So what I thought we'd do is get back into our groups, and I also gave you a very comprehensive list of constraints samples and constraint progress measure samples. The progress measures you don't have to own, but they might be the ones that you would like to see progress on. And so I wanted to make sure I gave you some more time to work together to maybe come up with one more, and that make sure that you've addressed the these interest areas that you had. Okay, that was as clear as mud, I can see. So I'm going to put you back in your groups. I'm going to ask you to do one more superintendent constraint that is different than the one you did yesterday, and maybe put a constraint progress measure against it as well. We may not use them all, but let's make sure you've had the time, because I felt like I rushed you a little bit yesterday. So I want to make sure you've had the time. These are important, they're critical, and so I want to make sure you've had the time to think about them. Does that make sense? Okay, so you can get back in your pairs and make sure that, and then we'll talk about all of them again, and we'll land on 5.
Okay.
Clear?
Yeah. We might.
Ours is put on.
Are you saying add one more
We
here?
have
No, I'm going to say,
this top
just
bullet and the second bullet.
ignore these for now, and let's do
There
one
needs to be
more,
some for these
like you
last
did
two.
yesterday where you came up with
Oh, come
one.
out new.
New, brand new,
Okay, brand
and then
new.
I put these on the top,
We need
because
more?
these were the
Can we just
areas
do-
that, way back in
Yeah.
August
Do we
or
elaborate on
September, we
equity,
talked
or do we
about,
just
that you were
add more?
concerned, that you wanted to see progress in
These were the
these
two
areas.
from yesterday. And so these
So you
are-
may not need a constraint
You
for
know,
all of
pretty
them,
much
but I
the
just put it there. One is particularly
So we
important to
just-
you.
Yeah, because this one is
Need the
mine.
last, something.
Okay,
But
then, in this
From a
sample
sample list,
sheet,
or do we
there probably
elaborate
is
on
a
this?
sample
Elaborate on
constraint, not that you
this
have to
and
use
use
it, that
this.
would go with any of these.
Okay,
Word
Okay.
it.
So,
This is incredibly important.
okay, then, there's, should be one in there, and if not, we'll build one.
See which ones there's a spare one.
that light is a great
Yeah.
leadership, ISD leadership.
It was in the packet.
So,
This even,
And here?
these
And,
two.
no, it wasn't, it was.
We don't have to do anything with the first two.
Oh.
Just the constraint and
yeah, like if there's something, these just leave alone, right? Because you guys came up with this, or this one. So, these were the areas that you, before the whole board said, these are things that are important to us, so maybe come up with something within these areas that is particularly important to you guys, and you might want to come up with two if you have different areas that are important. And in this, there are probably a sample that would go with it. So, it didn't have to be exactly like this, but we could use some of that.
Okay.
Okay?
Nice.
That make sense?
It does.
So is that clear
Yeah,
for you guys?
I think, yeah,
Okay, cool.
heard you explain it a couple times here, so.
Or die rule.
Any problems with it already?
Right.
And then my salad, I still
I
haven't
mean,
eaten
for
my
all of us,
salad
but
yet.
based on your experience.
Right, right.
So basically, we're looking at these topics, because these were all areas of concern.
Yes.
So we could
Okay,
pick
so
one of those and adapt one of these, or write our own.
Right,
That kind of
okay.
addresses it.
Just because it's academics.
Oh, this one.
Oh, that's what we're doing.
Yeah,
I
the
know.
first two bullets.
Okay.
are-
So these are, no, sorry.
So if we were to choose one, then I would go with this.
Just for my.
Because that's an issue that
I don't know what
that's been an issue for quite some time.
I'll just, that's one I like.
Is that just basically making sure that
Okay.
everyone's coming together, that we're,
So
culture that's open?
we'll look and see if there's one that's kind of related, or if we need to come up with our own.
Maybe just write down what you
Avenues.
want to see,
Community town halls are doing.
and we could craft it.
That came going
Learning.
to lead to this culture. That's fine.
Okay. basically coming together, sharing of ideas, information,
I don't know your money that you just do they work best for?
and a safe environment.
Okay, so let's do, Wednesday, Thursday? Wednesday, Thursday.
It's certainly check with everyone Tuesdays.
Yeah, I just want us to try to find it tonight because if there's.
Yeah, and that's really big. Yeah, it's just
It might be more
or
academic focused. Because of our families are close. Would that
Those-
yield academic outcomes?
yeah, those families need more support.
Let's do that.
I have an aviation dinner, but I'll cancel it.
Yeah.
I don't see anything here in the samples.
No.
We would have to devise one.
So, let's see here.
Okay, so,
Keep it going.
So the only two beds one I see this one right here.
I thought you got
So there's two sped ones, did you see?
Yeah, so that one is repeated down here.
And then this down
Yeah, this is
here.
right here, is, they just repeated it word for word.
But
The
it is
percentage of
constrained.
online money.
Superintendent shall not make operations such as words, sped.
Oh, no, that, I wasn't talking about that.
I think there's a second sped one. Okay.
And these are progress measures down here.
Oh, yeah, that's a good. And that one, this one is broader, because it includes all students. So I like that better.
so I think it's, so what we were talking, Renee and I were talking about is trying to come up with a constraint around district culture. Because that has, but that's not an issue in districts for some time.
Yeah.
We want to be sure that,
No, the resources
but there could,
available
but there's a couple of different things that go into that, I think it's
because they need the
about,
most important, a lot of times the support is there. The parents
What do you
don't
think of
know.
when I talk about district
don't
culture, okay, so I think of, how families
they're
and how
beneficial, so making
employees
sure that
feel about working in Judson. Are they proud? Are they happy? Do they want to stay?
I wonder if, like, the employee survey that we do, if there's like a question out of there that we could say, like, this particular
That will
measure
help them.
will not drop below X or something like that, or,
That would be the
stay
CPM to
above.
evaluate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
you know,
the superintendent shall not,
right.
about employee satisfaction.
Yeah, I'd have to see the
Yeah.
survey, or if there's like some sort of roll-up on that survey that gives like one big metric, so it's more all-encompassing than just
Over
choosing
that
one
one
question
area.
or something,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Because I think there's subsets about, do you feel supported, do you feel,
Yeah.
by
Yeah,
the
there
district,
are.
by the,
And
Yeah.
so, just making sure
Well,
there's
here.
communication.
The
yeah, but see, these
stakeholder
are
engagement average.
CPMs, but we can write a
Oh.
bigger thing
Yeah,
about
those
it.
are all
Okay.
CPMs.
Yeah.
And
But what is, say it again, what is it, and we can broaden it so
The
that that measures
stakeholder
it.
engagement average feedback score will increase from X to Y by.
Okay, now that's a good measure.
Yeah.
So what is the constraint that we
Right.
write? Then would be,
Operational decisions to prevent access of all students to learning.
the student shall,
including
the superintendent shall not allow
special
stakeholder engagement,
parents don't.
feedback to drop below current.
There was something in here where I was reading and then I was like, oh, the beginning of this, you can just like
Oh, okay.
insert different language. Let's see. Maybe like, the superintendent shall not operate without actively
That's exactly the one I was
monitoring
looking at.
staff culture as measured by the
We would direct.
annual staff survey or
We
something
want
like
the
that.
superintendent to be
Without monitoring.
What or at some prior meetings, concern.
But they use that one here, use that one there.
the feedback from
Read that back.
the superintendent shall not operate without actively monitoring the feedback from the employee survey, annual employee survey. And then the CPM could say it will be, that's how we measure it.
Maybe we can say, monitoring and acting on the feedback.
Responding to the feedback.
Yeah.
Well, when you say respond, that makes me think that she's going to say something back to those people and not take an action.
So like.
But response can be an action.
It can.
And so I am talking about an action.
Okay, and then I would say let's
Yeah.
be explicit in acting on.
Because I just asked that question the other day. When it was asked of me if there was an professionals to come that was awesome. However, the paraprofessional didn't get the response, so they don't know. Some of them don't know what he's telling me. And we said, yeah, we're already partnering with regional partnerships. However, the professional didn't know what was taking place, so there was a disconnect.
Yeah. Sometimes though, like on those surveys, they're anonymous, right? So you can't usually.
You can't just reach out to that person.
Directly to a particular person. But the word about that program needs to get out, yeah. Yeah.
Because there was a reason that it was put on.
Right.
So sensory.
And then the CPM would be,
The one on,
The stakeholder
the
engagement,
partnership.
or we can say employee survey, depending on whatever.
Oh, you could be specific, if we're gonna say,
Any child.
because that's what we have.
yeah.
And I know she exited Japan. I know she,
Okay.
I know she helped
We'd have to
develop
think about
goals
how
for
we
the
can
district
measure
based
it.
on that.
So I thought I saw that.
It's a good one, and that was really good. At least for the station.
And then for context, so we just got
And I know the campuses do
information officer.
a survey for parents.
And then
I don't think we do one at the district.
probably assume there's like a road,
Moving towards it.
so.
So then another one would
We need
be,
to be able to aggregate it across.
so then the
campuses.
other one would be the same thing with
That's also tracked.
Right.
families.
So the vehicle by which to do that really doesn't better to be, just kind of guide us as to where that needs to live. That way
And I think that
pounds.
addresses a lot of
Right.
different things.
No, I think that's good, because I see where he's trying to go. And so my question would be,
That's good.
what, so if this were to be initiated, so they have to have progress measures.
And I'm just writing.
So what would indicate to you that this would be happening? Like, what would you like to see out of that?
I think to answer that, I would need to understand the action items that are consistent with schools to give you an answer.
The culture.
Or like the redevelopment of campuses and programming is one thing, I guess.
What would you like you could say, I want to see more choice schools. I want to see some more schools of choice. I want to see more, and I think there are some ones around that, right? So we could say, we can write any, it doesn't have to be in here, right? We could say, it could be the percentage of students enrolled. It could be early college. It could be pathways. We could write this however you want. You don't have to write it. That's not your job. But you could say, I want to see more schools of choice. I want to see more pathways for students to get CPE. I want to see more. Does that make sense?
Does this one make sense?
You have pretty handwriting.
I just learned how to write again. Thank you.
Right, and I think that one was in there, and there are ones here measuring.
I see the value.
Well, I'm looking for that right now.
Because what you would, if you are,
Before you
this kind of to me is about like culture, right? And making sure, and equity even.
Pitfalls or problems you might have. Oh, I know.
this on here because I thought about this, because I remembered you talking about this.
They all break it down by African American and Hispanic. To me, that's breaking them apart, and I'm interested in all students.
Look at the fourth bullet from there. Well, you don't have to break it out, like, so if you wanted to, you know, you don't have to break it by, if you don't want to.
No, because I wanted to pertain to all students to learning, including special needs students. Is that too much?
Transparency or operational decisions that prevent access of all students to learning. Okay. So, tell me what's behind this.
I know some of our special needs students have what they call pull-out time, where they're taken from their special needs classroom or from their regular classroom, because we're trying to do inclusive teaching, and they get pulled out for, special things like reading or writing or math.
Right.
And so I just want to make sure that nothing prevents them from having access to that.
To learning time.
Right, because it's not just them, it's other students too that receive that
Right.
additional, like tutoring.
Yeah, no, I see
I
what you're
was
saying.
thinking
Okay,
of
I know
this,
it's
we could say the feedback from annual surveys.
Okay.
And then the two CPMs could be,
Yeah.
Because we do very well with our inclusive, educating, our educational program is very good.
stakeholder
This is talking about
surveys.
Where did I see that?
Well, I can use this and just change this from online.
Yeah.
In person.
Right.
In person. But
Oh,
for
yeah,
all
there you go.
students, not
Yep,
just
that's
for-
perfect. Yeah, good idea. And then even that second bullet is about secondary.
But it's all really good.
It breaks
Those
it
are
up.
good measurements for this.
It's great, even if it's not a long way.
Because we have them in elementary, secondary, and high school.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. Really? Okay, yeah, no, I knew I'd seen them, good.
I always had that kid whose desk looked like pigpen.
That is nice. Yeah, that was me too. That
So
was
what I
me as
used,
well.
I used to do is like little buddy.
That was a punishment for her.
No.
She loved
Those
it.
little organizers. You call them up and say, hey, let's do this in a really polite way, but could you talk to them or maybe help them get a little organized? I trust how you approach
The boys.
They loved it.
Really?
Yeah. They really did. Third and
It
fourth
does,
grade.
but you don't have to.
I can see the physical ability.
These are just examples.
I was just thinking about the boy.
I was the messy little girl.
And sometimes it is a girl.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's those girls that are ADD or ADHD.
Get you over here.
And they put it all in there.
Ms. King has
It's safe,
a lot of
because
questions.
it's all in there.
Yep.
And then you keep all the buttons. But we would do desk cleanup.
I'm still like that thing at my desk, like, it used to be my desk at work, my desk at home.
Really broad. I always had to clean at the end of the day because I couldn't come in and face it the next morning. I had to make sure things were organized for the next day. But my organization wasn't always what somebody else would want.
It's all I can do to shut off my computer at the end of the day.
Low maintenance.
The only reason I do it is because I have a newer computer, or they just replaced my computer like 3 months ago. And even when it's closed, the fan comes on and it's super loud. And I'm just like, exactly. And then it's like
Your interest is in, like, just culture, like how our teachers are doing.
That's a second
You're
gen,
offline.
you're not sure.
Exactly,
Turn it
exactly.
off and I can't just run back in there and do one thing.
That's fine, and I think we can
Makes
say,
sense.
Mark all those tabs that were
kind of,
open.
let's see.
Cleansing ritual at the end of the day.
You have to, Jenny?
Yeah, no, I do. I've gotten much better
So,
about it.
okay, I was gonna say, so
Think
now
so.
you've changed your
Maybe there's nowhere in
routine.
here, but anyway, you could say that the, like there's teacher attendance here, so not allowed.
Most days
Teacher attendance and
don't
your
start
working
working
campus
until 9
district
o'clock.
off. That's a culture one, that may be too
Good for you.
defined.
Is there a
Yeah.
calendar?
Okay.
That's kind of a
How do we track?
little come to Jesus
Mm-hmm.
I
event.
can find
Yeah,
out
it was.
but I see what you're saying. So you want, I think there's some really good constraints or progress measures.
You know,
Yeah.
like,
Which is why you had such a good outcome.
true.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
You know?
That is
Yeah,
true.
yeah.
And that you caught it early.
Yeah,
Right, and
early.
it can happen in,
Absolutely.
you know, yes, probably high blood pressure has something to do with it.
Positive ratings on climate
But it's a
surveys,
week,
right
it's a,
here.
genetic,
Yeah.
I mean, it's there.
Right, right.
And that
Yeah.
thing, and
You want annual
Over
percentage
time.
of distinguished
Yeah.
teachers retained,
Yeah.
annual staff retention rate,
So, but you're,
positive ratings
you're,
on climate survey, staff
changing and adapting, and that's what's important.
Yeah, yeah.
And how often
And
do
my
you
goal
roll
is
those stuff?
So those, do you
just
see
every
those
6
right
months.
here?
Like,
So that's good.
so,
Those are all kind of
I
filled
went,
out. So,
I had to go like a
maybe
Yeah.
we need to
and just
write the constraints.
Check everything.
Yeah.
Maybe, I'm gonna look over here, because I think I have one that is like that, but.
every day, probably like 3 times a day, of like asking me these questions. Like,
Teacher satisfaction.
can you speak to my fingers and just like feel me like touching your toes?
Diminish,
Like, yes,
you know, something like that around there, but I'm gonna look for it, but I see what you're saying. And then
Checking.
those are-
Yeah.
I can do all these
You feel
things,
like
right?
would measure
And,
progress.
and he,
Okay.
you know, I go to the doctor and I throw myself there, you know, like something. Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna
Like,
find
I still
that.
have all these things.
We're good.
We're good, we're
Yes.
ready.
If you're.
And we got CPMs too.
Is there, how are you guys doing? You're close?
He's
Close, sorry.
getting clarification on something.
Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, and you guys are good? Okay. I was gonna give you extra credit.
So he goes through the whole protocol
Go
again?
through the whole protocol, like,
If I'm not mistaken.
I think I'm okay. I think I'm ready for the advanced session now. But so at the end of May, I have to go and they're gonna do another angiogram to make sure that it's healing and stuff.
Okay, I don't have a board, so I'm just gonna have to.
But you're not getting ready.
No, no,
I
I'm
had
gonna go.
some
Oh,
headaches
yeah.
for a few weeks after coming back from hospital.
I think it works, I hope
I, like, fewer headaches than I had before.
It's just
You know, I
broken.
think
I think
before,
this leg is just.
Yeah, that back
I
leg
was maybe
doesn't.
getting,
I'll just take it up here and I'll fix it.
I think before I was starting to get headaches because I had blood pressure and stuff, just like stroke headaches and stuff like that.
I got to get on high blood pressure meds last time I went to the doctor.
I think Miss Betty wouldn't get the good one.
Yeah,
She wouldn't get the good one, that's not the one we used
My
last.
mom, my sister.
yeah, same.
Yeah.
My mom died of a stroke at 55, so.
I'm just gonna put it right, thank you, thank you. All right, thanks.
Thank you, Miss Betty.
All right, thank you very much. Okay. So first of all, before I write down the other ones, how are we feeling about the first two that you worked on last night? The first one is, the superintendent shall not allow the number of students in low performing, D or F rated, is how we define low performing, or there was a suggestion for C, to include C, campuses to increase or remain the same. So you guys still feel good about that?
Well, I still had the same question I had last night. When you say number of students, are we just, you saying we can't send more students to that school? Or,
So I think it's defined in the CPM, so, because I remember that question. So it'd be, you either you know, either you decrease the number of low-performing schools, right?
The intent,
You what?
which, is that like the original intent?
Yeah. So the number of low-performing campuses will decrease from X to Y by the end of year, or the percentage of students served in low-performing campuses will decrease from X to Y, which essentially is only done by
Capping enrollment.
Closing a school.
lifting up the campuses. So you can have it either way. And then the number of campuses that are effectively implementing, so this would be a one that I've seen where they're implementing, like, how are you working with the campuses to lift them up? And that would be like a true progress measure. Like, what are you implementing to raise campuses up? And I think in the dialogue we had yesterday, there were a lot of things that they talked about that could be, you know, like a new, you know, like the reading academies, right? All of that is going to improve those campus ratings. So first of all, does the constraint still feel like it? Two of you guys came up with it, so.
For context,
Yeah.
how many DNF schools do we have right now?
3.
We have 3, but yes, 3.
How many Cs do we have?
Oh God, I don't want to tell you the wrong thing, and I didn't.
It's a lot.
It's a lot more than,
Yeah.
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 I think my hesitation with doing C is because it is so many currently, then what could potentially happen is some of those Cs could move down to F or D and you're still like complying with this. So I think the spirit behind it is to make sure that our lowest performing schools are getting lifted up, and then, you know, as that happens, we can lift the floor on this, if that makes sense.
And the other thing is if we say that we're trying to decrease the number of C schools, it's going to increase as we move F and D schools up to C. And so that then,
Yeah,
But
So-
that doesn't
The
really,
spirit of it is to make
Is
sure
to make-
that every school, regardless of, even if it's a B,
Right.
we want to see progress at every campus.
Sure.
But that's a good way to word it, that sounds really good.
Because my concern would be if only 3 are at DNF, we are measuring DNF, and we're not paying attention to C, and C is still obviously not acceptable.
Right.
Right. So I don't want to send the wrong virtue signal in that we're not paying attention to C. However, I'll stop. I don't want to take my eye off of C because there is a critical mass of them there.
But is there a way to word it with a value-added component to it? That we're adding value, and when I say value, that we're improving each one, whether, even if it's a B, you should want it to be an A. If it's a
Right.
C, you should want it to be a B.
Is that too
I mean,
much?
how do you measure that?
Yeah.
well, you can have a progress measure that says, but it's a measure of if you want to set a goal around it.
Right.
Like if you had a constraint progress measure that was to, you know, you got 3 Ds and Fs, and so if your goal is to have 0, then that would be a constraint. If you are trying to move C schools, you could have a separate progress measure that says we want to move from X to Y. So you see results, and you could even have a goal progress measure on B schools if you wanted to. They just need to be, you know, it's the same as goal progress measures, right? You have to look at them, what is aspirational but still attainable, what is reasonable, all of those things. But you could have it, and then you just take the D and F rated out of this and say we want to shall not allow the number of students in. Then you could say C and below to increase. No, that would be hard. I'd have to think about how, because then you're right, what
Yeah.
you said, you could just move them. But you could still have the CPMs that way, if you wanted to see progress.
We could leave it with the D or F, and then just as the CPMs, we're monitoring all, right?
Right?
D, F,
Mhm.
C, and B,
Yes, you could write it in
and write
there
the
like
C-
that.
CPMs to match that.
Right. And you could say, I could
Yeah.
wordsmith this a little.
Yeah,
I just
Think
don't
of-
have it on the top of my
think about
brain.
that one.
But yeah, we could come up with that and still measure all three, like, we're showing progress, because we ultimately want all A schools.
Right.
Right? So, so I'm gonna just write the D and F and a C. But we really want all. And so then the CPMs might be the D and F schools go away. And we decrease C, that they go up, not down, but up. We'll make sure we, and then we also decrease B, that also go up. So that's a really rough way of writing it, but does that make sense to y'all? Would
So
that be
you're
progress
saying that
you
it would
wanna see?
you would need to have a different CPM for each IC, rather than having one
Right.
that would include them all?
Because just one would be really hard to measure unless you just said progress made. Like how the percentage of schools who improve by one grade point level or one grade level is X
Mm-hmm.
by, right?
Whatever date.
But,
Mhm.
you know, they might all be B schools that go to A schools and we didn't move any of our Ds and Fs. That could be.
Right.
I understand.
You
Would that solve it for you?
I'm gonna need you to say that one more time, because I'm the slow kid.
I'm not sure it was clear in my own brain. So if we're wanting to improve all schools, right, we want to get all of them towards an A. So we're going to build the constraint somewhere around in there, right? Then what we want to do is see progress in we want to see D and F schools going up to C schools.
So you're above.
Right, or F going to D at least, you know, we
Right.
want to see progress, right? We want to see fewer Cs, so Cs going to Bs or As, and Bs going to As.
Mhm.
Yes.
That makes sense. Does that make sense, Sam? Makes sense?
I'm pausing only because I think, and I could be wrong, but I think that the way that the A through F rating system is set up, there's no way for, like, across the state for every school to get an A, because you're in a comparison group with other schools. So, like, some of them are gonna get A's, some of them are gonna get B's, some of them
That's
are gonna get
actually
C's,
not the
D's, and
case.
F's. No?
No, it was fixed, so that
Okay.
everyone has the ability to be an A. They took away that.
When did they do that?
When the
the
newest
years when it wasn't
ISO
rated?
came in. It was about, I think, maybe 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago.
Okay. I made
It
a
was
face
before
because,
COVID.
okay. I made a face because they've only been rating schools for like that long,
Yeah,
but,
I'm not sure, I mean, I'd like for us to look that up, to be
Yeah.
quite honest.
Well, that's part of the ISO training, and I'll show it to you on the
Okay.
thing where it says that. But yes, it's not designed, the new rating system, which came with the A through F,
Mm-hmm.
was that it is not designed so that schools can't get to the highest rating.
okay.
For my learning,
I don't trust them.
What?
Trust but verify.
for my learning, whenever you look at the C scale, right, like the points, do you chop up, for lack of a better term, do you disaggregate the schools that are like casi Bs, like almost Bs?
We get,
So whenever you look at Cs, do you know like
how close they were to
the
being a B.
majority? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
they get a score out of 100, so they might be a 79 and be a C.
Oh, absolutely.
So like
Yeah.
an 80, that would be a B. So then do you deploy, and I mean just out of curiosity for my learning, do you then deploy resources to those campuses? Do you prioritize different resources based on like, that's an easy win, right? Okay.
And we also go a step further in regards to looking at it specifically by student, to say, God, this student was so close to approaches or to meets, and and looking at it that closely by students too.
And I think it's, System of Great Schools talks about this a little bit in their system, but I can get data on this as well for you. But I think that what we're saying is we want our schools to keep improving, right? We want more opportunity for children to be in high-performing schools. So that's kind of where the nature of this is. We don't want our students in the lower performing schools to increase. We want students in higher performing schools to increase.
Right, but just for my preference, because Ms. Eaton made a really good point, if it could be worded a little bit differently, so when people read this, the superintendent should not allow the number of students in low performing blah, 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 blah. It makes, to me, sometimes when you read that real quickly or to somebody else, it kind of sounds like, oh, you're not going to let them into that school. It's not about that. It's about not having them.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
So you
it
said not let the
absolutely does.
campuses, blah, blah, and so the students maybe?
Yeah, no, we're going to fix
Okay.
that. We're going to fix the wording so it sounds better.
Okay.
And so what I'll do is get the general concepts from you guys, then I'll wordsmith it and send it back for your review, make sure I didn't lose any of that context. And then they go to you for the actual CPMs. We're just giving you guys ideas of the CPMs.
Got it.
Okay?
Okay,
Does that make sense?
I think so.
Okay, so then the second one is the soup. This is about equity. I think this one was an equity one that came from this group here. And the superintendent shall not, you guys have it, I don't have to write it down, shall not operate without examining the data annually to ensure no course availability or classroom inequities exist for students. So I think the idea behind this was, are we equitably distributing, are we equitably offering access to all our kids and availability, course availability, right? Does everybody get a chance to take an AP class? Or do some schools have 20 AP classes and some have 2? Or and you would correct me because this came from your group if I'm missing it, or are there classroom inequities? And so the CPMs that we talked about were AP courses, right? So do they have access to AP courses? And we could disaggregate that by race.
Is that what
And
that
then
means?
student-teacher ratios.
Is that what that means? To ensure no course
I don't get that part right there.
availability? That's what
To
that means?
ensure no course availability or classroom equities.
Inequities exist. So
Or
course
classroom.
availability, do all students have access to courses? And specifically, I think you guys were interested in AP courses.
We identified that, but it could be any course availability, but more so not to lose sight on the inequities of the student-teacher ratios within the schools, to ensure that this side of the district has the same ratio as this side, that there's just equity.
Right. So there's course inequity and there's classroom inequity.
So that would be accurate. And it's not, I wasn't personally just targeting only AP, just in general. But AP is a good one if we're going to monitor something.
But the way, just for clarification, I'm not trying to be nitpicky, for clarification, depending on what we really mean, the way our 3 high schools are set up, the same courses that you take at Veterans, you can't take, because we've set them up to be those pathways there.
And that I understand with the CTE courses, but what's invariably happening is that we have a student who may not pick this because they live by Wagner, and they're not going to take 2 or 3 buses there's just those potential inequities that might be barriers to saying this family would love to be over here in the CTE program, but there's issues with getting to school.
But we do bus them.
I know, but they have to get up earlier. Wouldn't they have to get up and meet at a middle school? I don't know what the latest process is.
Okay, so that's what I'm asking for clarification. So is the board then wanting that we have a cosmetology program at every,
No, just the access, that there's a flexibility is there. And I don't know, like I said, this is your area, not mine, but we would have to come to some collective understanding. But the problem is just ensuring that a student that, say at Wagner, would, if they want to go to cosmetology, that they could, and we wouldn't, because of their geographical area, wouldn't hinder that ability. That they would be able to do so, which means if we need to have additional bus services, anything that would ensure that we meet that need is just to have a lens on that.
And clearly, these are not going to be solved in like 1 year kind of thing. That's not what these are intended to do. They're saying, are we working towards this? Now,
But aren't we already doing that? That's what
Offering
I'm-
buses?
Then that may be met, but I just get the feeling, and forgive me, there is a disconnect a little bit as I'm orientating myself back, that students had to meet at a middle school, and then they were bused from that middle school to the high school,
I
and that starts much earlier. Their journey to get from one part of the district to the other is a much earlier journey than someone already near Veterans Memorial, for example. And so would that potentially be a hardship on a family that can't do that?
And it shouldn't be a bad experience. Like, I shouldn't have to get up that extra.
I mean, those are just things to work through,
But
yes.
that's the reality.
Bless you.
But that's kind of the reality. I mean, it's not like we can pick their house up and move it, but
It's important, but it doesn't have to be.
So what would be a solution?
Well, with the bond, we were trying to get
That
more
was
bus
the,
routes.
yeah, to get that
That
bus.
would have
you gotta
helped.
have people to drive
Barn.
them too. That's an
Right,
issue.
but choice is not a real choice if the students
Yeah.
can't comfortably access.
And again, I'm not even saying that it exists, but it could exist, and it's certainly something we should be exploring to ensure there's equity across the
Yeah,
district.
I think everybody's got the same concept in mind, and the realities are the realities, absolutely. But it doesn't have to be.
Right.
I think that's the goal, like,
so
How do we
this,
get there?
this kind of
Right.
stuff is sometimes surfaced through an equity audit.
Yeah.
So that may be something that the board wants to consider in thinking about, you know, what does an equity audit look like? And true equity audits are about access, they're about materials, they're about facilities, it's a great thing to do before a bond, in my opinion, but that's something that could come into play. Or, if it's access, then you probably need to address, like, which are the most important access points right now that you want to see improve. Like you had mentioned the ratio. If there is an issue with that, some kids are in classrooms, in schools, where consistently they have a much higher student to teacher ratio in this school than they do in this school, then that's an equity issue.
Yeah.
And if that's what you want to address, then that's one thing, and that's a measurable constraint to measure. AP classes is another one to say, do we have access? Who's enrolling in AP? Who's succeeding in AP? All of those things are also equity issues when you frame them in that way.
And the hard questions will be like Kitty Hawk, real school with too many students in it. If we need to do something innovative and have only a 5th and 6th grade campus, do we need to find one that's not populated? I mean, for immediate usage, because we didn't pass a bond. In the future, we can be more strategic about a bond and a facility. But right now, if we're going to truly look at the equity and the student-teacher, something needs to be done. If it's identified that Kitty Hawk is all the classes are way higher than Metzger and Woodlake and all that kind of stuff, there's no equity there. So we build that.
So this introduces a conversation about equity. Equity is a long game, right? It takes a long time to dismantle, right? But it is definitely important to look at, and certainly has been proven that dismantling those inequities improves outcomes and opportunities for students. Like, nobody can really argue that, right? So the link to equity is always, does this improve outcomes? It's not equity for the sake of equity until it turns into action that actually students get to feel. And so that's where I think what we're trying to get at, and what this introduction to this conversation is about. It may not live as a superintendent constraint, I think we can frame it that way, but it could just live as, this is something that's very important to this board and to the superintendent, and we think it's important to our community, and so we're gonna have conversations about what do we need to do to get there. But I do think that if you feel like, and I don't have the data here, so we don't know. You may come back and say, here's the data, there's no inequity. But we need to know that before we can't just pretend, we're not gonna guess at it, right? Just like we didn't guess at the goal progress measures, we're not gonna guess at these. So we would want to have, before we voted these in, we'd want to know the data, like the baselines. Like, is there an inequity here? Is there an inequity here in this? Is there an inequity here? Is there an inequity in the CTE? I get the busing and all of that and access points. That's probably a longer term kind of something you got to fix through bonds, and it starts to be, I've seen districts who quadrant it out, right? And so then you have an offering here, you have an offering here, you have the same offerings everywhere. That's usually what's done in bigger districts to make it equitable. So something that we can think about, but I want to make sure that that I've heard you guys, that you do want to explore this equity conversation around these type of inequities. Access, opportunity. Okay.
It would be nice to do before we go after our bond again, so that people can better understand what it is we're trying to improve on. And it might give us some more language for our bond proposal.
Right. Okay, so maybe what we can do is get some data put together and then come back and say, okay, what are the data points that you guys want to hit on first? Does that make sense? Knowing that we want to get to them all. Okay. All right, so those are those two. So now let's go to what you guys have. We're adding. Okay. So I think here we had teacher culture.
District culture.
District culture.
It had a teacher lens to it, but yes.
Yes.
District culture.
So that was a constraint that we're going to write. We haven't quite written it, I don't think, but this is going to be like, how are teachers doing? Our staff.
Yeah,
Our
pretty much
staff.
communication, yeah,
What?
keeping open communication to kind of
Yeah.
see.
So communications, how are our staff doing, right? And there's lots of measurables we can have and sample constraints that we can measure. There's surveys, there's things like that, like retention, teacher retention, all of that is incredibly important in this.
Years at the district, experience, stuff like that.
And that's okay if they're not. I just would like to.
That would probably fall into this. retention.
Yeah, but that's a measurable,
Okay, so that's one. Everybody feel okay about a district culture one that is talking about
What does that first part say? How our staff what?
Doing.
doing?
Okay.
Do they feel that there's clear communications? Are we retaining our staff, right? This is probably something you're already measuring, you're all doing.
It's part
So
of
it's
our
just
survey that we
lifting it up into board work so that make sure that the board is following it.
And obviously another measurable is the lower amount of grievances being filed. Things like that, we have a lens that we know we're monitoring. We take our eye off of it, and we might have a lot of level 1 grievances we don't even know. So that always helps. We want to see lower level ones.
Okay. All right, so yours was district culture. What will you guys have?
We address district culture as well.
Yes, we
Okay,
do.
was it
And ours is
different than this?
kind of, a little bit, because we think district culture is not just about staff, but it's also about families.
Okay,
And so what we said was the superintendent shall not operate without actively monitoring and acting on the feedback from the annual stakeholder surveys.
So those
And then the
surveys.
CPMs would be the employee survey,
Staff.
the surveys of the parents
Parent survey.
in the community?
Mhm.
Do you want,
What about students?
we didn't put that on there because I don't know if we're doing student
Do we do
surveys.
student surveys?
So,
No.
You should, yes.
Okay, so
Do
this
we
is,
do surveys when students transfer? If they
There's an
transfer out of the
exit.
district, like an exit,
There's an exit,
And
the parents fill it out usually.
but not the
this
students?
one's more comprehensive
No,
stakeholder.
because they go
Yeah.
to draw them
And it's optional.
to fill it out.
It's optional.
And any of those surveys are optional.
There is an amazing student experience measurement that is something that very rarely do districts measure, but it talks about how students actually experience schools, and it should inform how you deliver services
Mhm.
to students.
But they're very honest.
Seems like we would at least ask our seniors before they graduate, something like that, so that we, we can build on what we're strong at, and if we spot a genuine concern over all 5 high schools, 6 high schools, kind of find out what we can do to enhance that experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we can gain a lot by listening to our kids.
Oh, yes, they're brutally honest, that's for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think we could, this one is more, is
So it
more,
could be 2 parts?
Yeah.
it could be, or 2 different
merge.
constraints.
It could be,
No.
yeah.
This one, you could focus more on like the retention and the, like really, are our teachers, are we keeping our best teachers? Are we, all of that, those could be the CPMs.
Did we do
And this could be more about how are, what is the culture,
Right.
how are they feeling, the climate, not
climate,
culture. So this becomes a little bit more culture, this becomes a little
Becomes
more
climate.
climate.
Okay, yeah. That makes sense.
It does.
Okay.
Okay.
One last question. In your experience, does the community outside of the ones that are receiving direct services have a role or have a place here? So the
Community
business community, the NGOs, the CBOs that are within our boundaries, should they have a voice? Or
In
is
those
that, or should
stakeholders.
that be somewhere else? Because they are influencers and we do rely upon their infrastructure for a number of
And their
different reasons.
donations too, when we ask them for money.
Well, they-
You have a foundation, you have an education foundation?
Yes, we do.
That's
People like
where
us
they
that don't
should be
have kids in
asking
school,
that
taxpayers.
So, but let's look at it from the other perspective, right? If we're building out, if we have an infrastructure to provide human capital for post-secondary and for jobs, isn't it important to have a perspective on how that employer, who is our client in a sense,
Yes.
right? Because we're providing students for their employment, for their business. Should they have a voice? And if so, where?
I would argue that I don't know that they need a voice directly in the school district because, for example, an employer in Bexar County probably has people from all over, including from Bexar County and outside of Bexar County schools. So they probably have an opinion about like workforce development, but I don't know that it would be specific to one specific school system.
But for us, for Judson, our special needs students, they get bused from Judson to the Forum to work at 2 of the stores over there. They don't get paid, but they get to go over there
Training.
for the work experience and the training and
Right.
stuff. My
So for
grandson
that
benefited from
program,
that
yes,
greatly.
but
you
like
know.
at a district level, I don't know.
Does your opinion change at all if, like, you think about CTE business partnerships, right? Because that's part of it, right?
Sure.
So CTE has to have a business for hours, right?
Right, to do their practicum or.
Okay. Does that change for you at all?
So again, I'd argue that is important for program evaluation,
Okay.
not for driving the district
Oh,
decision
no,
making.
not,
Yeah.
I agree
So I
with
don't
you
know that
there.
it would live here. I think it's important. I don't
Not
think it
there.
lives here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's a good distinction.
Because the program is phenomenal. My grandson benefited from it greatly.
And so that would be, and I'm sure that the programs and the leaders of the programs are probably talking to their partners.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Coach Ed is
Getting
good about that.
Right, so. Okay, so,
I don't know.
no other questions on this? So we got kind of we have a culture one and we have a climate one. And then we have,
We kind of split efforts, so why don't you go first, Missy?
You sure?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I tried to follow this guideline. It says the superintendent shall not make transparency or operational decisions that prevent access of all students to learning, including special ed students. And then the constraint that we came up with was the percentage of in-person learning at all school levels that receive daily instructions, including special ed, 504, and dyslexia services, will increase from X% to Y% by, this date. And then I have the 3 CPMs, and each one is for the elementary level, one's for the middle school level, one's for the high school level.
and so the context behind this is that you wanted to make sure that there was in-person learning time specifically for SPED students.
Yes. Well, all students.
All students, but, and so that SPED
Emphasis
students were
on
still
SPED
getting.
students, 504, and dyslexia.
So then, that would be something, and I don't know how, if you feel there are measurables around, or if you're having,
I have to think about that, I'm not sure.
okay.
Ms. Eaton, will you read that one more time, please, just from me?
All of it, or
The first part?
it says the superintendent shall not make transparency or operational decisions that prevent access of all students to learning, including the special needs students.
Mm-hmm.
And then the constraint measure is the percentage of in-person learning at all school levels that the percentage of in-person student learning at all school levels will receive daily instructions, including special needs, 504, and dyslexia services, will increase from 1% to another by a certain day.
So you're including in special ed, dyslexia, 504, and, did I miss something?
Special ed.
Well, I'm
Special
saying
ed.
all students with special emphasis on
those
extra
students.
groups.
Right.
Yeah.
And,
So students receiving specialized services.
right.
Okay.
There you
I didn't
go.
know how to word it.
Yeah, I'm
just-
trying-
It's a hit or miss.
No.
No, you're on the right track.
Because those are different umbrellas
Right,
and
right.
the way you qualify is different.
And I think that's what, this one is and I couldn't get it either. She did a better job than I did on this. I think the specialized services around, it's mostly about transparency. Like, we're not pulling our kids out of the classroom and not providing learning opportunities for them. That was the intent behind that.
Yeah.
Not yours, but on the one that was
Okay.
written.
Basically
Is,
inclusion.
look, is our district actually doing anything for
So
these
implementing
children?
the IEPs and implementing the
Right.
504 plans and
For our
providing this
students.
for those services.
And are we measuring that and looking at it and making sure that we're doing it?
I was a little confused when you said you wanted the number to go up because
No,
because I don't want us to increase the number of
I
students
just
getting
said
services.
we'll decrease from
You want to
a
increase
percentage
the
to another.
Services.
given.
Right.
Got it, okay.
I'm just trying to follow this paper.
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't know what I'm doing.
No, I'm trying to make it,
Yeah.
Just
Yes.
like with the
I
rest of
just
them.
don't
we
know how
got
to
words
get to
with
it.
them,
Yeah, I
right?
don't know how to word it.
And that's okay. This is, yes.
But I guess I'm really confused in this one because that's
Yeah.
driven so much by the ARD committee.
Right.
Could somebody give me an example as to how what you would want from me on that? Because that's driven by the ARD committee and so unique to each special student that I want to follow, but I'm trying to follow.
Because the case managers are responsible to make sure that, you know, the IEP is being, you know, followed and accommodations are available.
And also,
So-
and I guess my concern is because I've been told several times that we provide such good special ed services that sometimes people move into our district, so people might not see the increase of special ed students as a positive thing, but if that is truly the reason, then it is a good thing that we're providing so many services. So I'm looking at what would be the data that the board would want from me on that.
Well, I think then it would be kind of are you providing those services, and
Some parents
what
are
is
very
that?
happy with their.
how's the implementation of those services? So this one, I think we got to look at a little deeper too. I think it's along with the equity one. But I see, and I think this is good, is because we're saying this is a challenge, or this is something that is important to you, and consequently to the board, is how well, and I also think that's a great point, is if you are serving learning, you know, the kids with special needs better than the surrounding districts, then we need to lift that up and isolate those results. Like, how do you know that you are?
Right. We've gotten a new special ed executive director, and I have seen some amazing changes that she's gotten. Just recently, you know, TA coming in and telling us that we did a phenomenal job with, you know, their audit. So there's been several things that have happened within the last year that the staff has worked really hard in this area. So I like it. I'm just trying to get clear as to what would be what I would provide.
Maybe we need to have discussion with that new
Okay.
leader to say, what are you measuring to know if you're successful?
I
And
think
might
that could be
lifted
the
up.
audit, could be part of it. What are the findings of the audit, and that the negative findings decrease and the positive
Even our,
comments increase.
but even our attorney had come to us and, well, come to me, I should say, and told me how, like, before there used to be so many cases and now there's not. So,
So I
Yeah,
think
complaints.
what this could come out of is a conversation with your new leader, looking at the audit, and it may be that it comes back and you bring the same as the equity. If we did an equity audit and we didn't show any inequities, we don't need an equity constraint.
Right.
If you if you look at this and we don't see any challenges, right, then it's kind of like, okay, keep doing what you're doing, and
just so I will forget, you might want to put the word compliance there, because I think that
Yeah.
might be one of the big keys that we want to make sure
Yeah.
that we're in, because special ed is so much of the
Right.
area of compliance.
Right.
We want to make sure that we're compliant. Maybe that, I'm
And-
not sure if that.
I think that might be kind of what you were thinking, Ms. Eaton, is are the students receiving the services they're entitled to? Is
Right.
that right?
Well,
And that is a
because-
compliance thing.
We did, as you said, and we did. We used to have a lot of complaints, special needs type complaints and stuff that the lawyers had to handle. I know it was one particular family that put us through hell. And did they go away? Is that what happened?
The boy
oh
left
my
they left the
God.
district, I
He did.
You
think.
know, because that was my introduction to it.
I
was
remember.
just this one family.
That boy in that wheelchair.
Yes,
careful.
Lord,
Yeah.
you
Open
know.
session.
But and I wish him well, you know. But I have noticed that, wow, it's been like maybe 2+ years since you've had to come to us to say, hey, you know, we got a special needs type case. I get very positive feedback in the community about our programs.
okay, well then.
I was just trying to do the lesson.
She's trying to follow directions.
She did, and I'm just, go ahead.
Well, I do want to say that in our last board meeting, though, we received a warning or something. Remind me of that.
On the
Where that-
taper report, it said under monitoring or something.
Yeah, well, tell me, because that was I remember that. I thought we were doing fantastic, but then we're under some sort of,
I can't remember exactly what it was, but I'll go back and look it up. It could have been the number of special ed students going to DAP, but I'm not positive. I'll have to go back and look that up.
It was on the cover sheet, but it may just have to be, like, a lot of districts have that on their first page. It's, here's the rating, and then,
Yeah, I'll have to go back
Yeah.
and look.
Yeah, it was, I didn't ask her, but obviously that was something to come back to, because that stood out.
And was that current data from last year?
It was
Or was
in our
it,
last-
because
it
on
was-
paper, it's,
Well,
they're all over the
It
place
was in our
sometimes.
last board meeting.
Well, I mean the data that was presented, because with taper, some of it's 2 year, you look at 2
Yeah,
years
yeah,
previously.
I realize.
I do think one of the things that, now that I'm recalling too, that you spoke about, Trustee Eaton, before, was like, are we, how are we communicating with the families of our sped children, right? Or children that are receiving services, how are we
Yeah, when we talked
communicating?
about it last year.
And so that maybe we could play into this, having a specific CPM about surveying our parents, our families with children who need special services. Like, how do they feel? Are they feeling like they're receiving? And we tease that out a little bit in the survey data. Would that be something that would be meaningful to you?
Yeah.
Okay. Because what I don't want to do is have this become a constraint. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, no.
I was just saying that we are having a parent survey this year, and that could be something that we have a radio button that says, are you a special ed, parent, your child receives special ed service, click here, and then they get a different drop down.
Questions.
And then then you have data that says, yes, we are delivering these services, and the families feel good about it.
Right.
So would that be, because I don't want to get too deep into this if this is not a real problem in the district.
I agree.
Okay. So I'm going to put that kind of up here. And then we make that a CPM. That way, we're not trying to but if there is an issue, that'll get teased out. And certainly, if in the survey it says, we're not getting the services, our child is not getting these services, or we don't feel, then we know there's a challenge, and maybe those services are not being delivered with fidelity across the district. So,
You gonna do it?
yeah, use your turn.
So I did choice and innovation. For context, I was centering student experience and agency, providing families and students agency over their academic experience, right? So the superintendent shall not allow adult convenience, historical culture, perspective, or preference to take priority or lead potential innovative pathways towards choice, innovation, and access. And then percentage of students enrolled in innovative schools will increase from that affects the way. So this plays into the infrastructure that we already started putting in place with systems of great schools, the work that our Chief Innovation Officer will be doing, additional pathways. So I mean, it's already kind of baked in. I think it needs to be monitored to ensure that we increase high quality seats, obviously, and then the programming and the continued exploration and discovery of potential new programs for the district.
So, if this is where you're going as your theory of change, theory of action, system of great schools, then what this constraint should do is lift up that challenge, right? What do you need to live into that challenge? And the board resources it, the board leans into it. So this is kind of where I would say it's saying, if you're committed to this structure, then you have to be able to demonstrate that you're moving towards it and making hard decisions to get there, right? As opposed to, well, we say we're going to be here, but we're really not making any changes.
Does it have to be only system of great schools?
No.
It can be anything with choice. If choice and innovation, it's like we're not going to just keep doing the same old thing and think we're going to get better results.
I think it should be anything like a CAST, System of Great Schools, whoever wanted to, the 1882, different types of academies, different magnets type.
So all of those, and we can, I'm sorry,
No, I'm sorry, never mind, go ahead.
did I miss it?
No. It's too many to really, I don't think we really want to list them because we don't want to limit ourselves. It's just about the
Right.
innovation, I think.
And so what we'll have to do is, do you guys want to see programmatic measurements? Like how many programs of choice are we implementing, or do you want to see school implementation level? And I ask that because there are differences, right? You can have a high school that has 4 choice programs in it. Or you could have a high school that's an early college high school.
We have all that.
I think we maybe need to look at each level, elementary, middle, and high, and have something for each of those.
Right.
But it's about, I'm going to rephrase, it's about ensuring student access to a variety of innovative programs.
Right. I've seen this written like,
Yeah.
the superintendent shall not allow only one choice to families in the district. But there are always multiple choices, multiple options. Right?
And that we're increasing those options.
Right. That we're always
So we measure
increasing
how
it.
many different things, and again,
Right.
because,
And high quality options.
and again, it's got to be, I think we have to look at it at the different levels, because what's available at high school obviously is going to be way more advanced than what we do at elementary.
And middle.
Yeah.
And we kind of have to give them time on these because it starts building, right, from elementary, so it's a pathway, through middle into the different high schools. So things have to be set in place to kind of make sure that they're prepared for the next level. So, yeah, it takes time.
So, okay, so we have one on, we've pretty much hit all of your areas of concern, right? The 5 areas of concern. We have the improving campuses, right? So better seats, high quality seats for kids, improving equity. So we've talked about equity, we're going to build on that one. We've got the culture and climate. So both for our educators, our team, and all our stakeholders, parents and students included. And then choice and innovation. So we've got all 5 of your areas of concern hit on here. Does that feel good? So now we just need to wordsmith them and get them, and then go to Dr. Ball's team to say, okay, how can we both best show progress in this? And then we'll bring it all back to you. Does that sound good?
Okay.
Anything we've missed here?
I know, exactly. This is pretty,
I think it's actually also a great way to start, like you said, to start to think about, how do you build language around a bond when you have a plan for equity, when you have a plan for innovation, when you have a plan.
it makes sense.
Right? So these bring this all into board work, which is great. I think we'll end it here because we're,
Did you remember, I want
oh
to.
yeah, okay, we're gonna go to that, yeah.
I know it's really hard in the spring because graduations start to happen, banquets start to happen, events. So I wanted to see if everybody could look at your calendar. We picked some dates, but let's see if by chance anybody else can make these. Okay, here we go. The first set is either March the 2nd and the 3rd
These are for what?
for this to continue.
Continue.
Oh,
Okay.
March 2nd and 3rd, like next week? Yeah.
Okay, don't do
Let
that one.
me see.
We had this crazy idea also, if y'all wanted to give up your whole Saturday and do it March the 12th.
I won't be here. I'll be in Mexico. Sorry.
Okay, that's okay, we want to be with you. I know it's for free. I know,
Okay, that's right.
Crazy idea.
Yeah.
It really
Aren't we here the March the 1st at 7:30?
Yes,
At
ma'am.
7
At
o'clock?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh,
But
okay.
she's talking about the second and third.
Yeah, I know, it'd be like a whole.
I have a work training on the evening of the 3rd,
That's
so I
okay.
couldn't do
Well,
that.
we have another
Sorry,
one.
it'll be me every time,
No,
probably.
that's, March, how about March the 10th and the 11th?
I will also be in Mexico, because that's still spring break, right?
Well, ours starts.
Our
Oh,
spring break
okay,
doesn't
sorry.
start
Till the
until
11th.
after.
My spring,
Do you want to just continue to tell us you'll be in Mexico?
She's moving to Mexico.
yeah.
Okay, how about this, again, this might not work, but how about maybe like, the 30th and the 31st? March 30th and 31st?
Let me see, nothing, that doesn't sound familiar.
It's good for me.
The 31st, yeah, we have to
Educators.
distinguish the
Okay,
the
okay.
31st and 1st.
Okay, let us look again, and then Betty will call y'all. Is that okay?
So sorry.
It's okay, it's okay. I knew that was gonna be hard because it was.
Yeah, we start doing all our
We start-
celebrations.
yeah,
and-
having
And I really thought these were our last two. I mean, I remember feeling so overwhelmed the last time we did this, and I will just give you kudos. I enjoyed these last 2 days. I'm ready to do 2 more. But I literally thought this was going to be it.
I thought
So
so, too.
we're going to move forward, it looks like, and I think it's healthy and it's been positive. So we're just finding the dates that work.
What do you have, the
Well, I
30th?
think I'll tell you where you are.
Okay.
We're at monitoring now, right? So once we finalize these, then those are voted on. The framework is in place, we build out the agendas, we talk about the monitoring calendar. Those are things that I can also build out and send over, but we do need just a few more hours, maybe one session, at least to just sew that up so that the whole thing is there, right? I had hoped to get through the monitoring part in these two as well. But this is an incredibly critical piece, and I didn't want to cut it short. I didn't want to cut the constraints short, and you were having good dialogue. So it could just be one night, that we do it and pull it together, and then we say, here's the monitoring calendar, and now we're going to start to live in it. And it would be done with, like, the LSG part of it. Then it becomes, are you living into it?
Maybe everybody, so if I could just see what y'all want. Do y'all want me to try really hard before spring break, which is gonna be hard, or everybody's okay after?
When is spring
After.
break?
14th through the
I
18th.
absolutely cannot before
That's
spring break,
not-
because I will be out of town
Okay,
from March
after is
5th
fine.
through the
That at least helps me. Betty and I
Yeah.
will meet with Patricia, and we'll try to give you some dates, and we'll call again and give some dates. Is that okay there?
Okay. And what that allows is your team to work on these.
Yep.
Right, to get these and then to bring them back to the board. I can send them to you. Let me just also, just so you understand fully how this can work, so completely your choice, the board's choice, is that, this is essentially, we'll have a whole framework in place, and the framework's working. Now, it's not gonna just go really smooth. There's gonna be some
Sure.
additional monitoring, and I can do that, and there could be some coaching and some sprucing up and some doing some different things, so that kind of lingers on. It doesn't have to be full training sessions, right? It could be, here's some things that we need to work on. I watched your last meeting, here's what the score I gave you, here's where you are, here's some things. But there are other things that this board, I would recommend that your board really look at, which is the operating procedures, which is maybe agenda review and how that looks. So those are things, there's policy diets, we do need to write this into policy, and we do need to vote it for it in a board meeting. So all of those things have to happen. They don't really require full trainings, or you could do operating procedures through a committee. And I could help you with that, or you can do it on your own. I mean, there's a lot of different things. So that coaching relationship is purely up to you, how deep you want to go with it, or I can, finish up the monitoring and say good luck to you guys.
Can I ask a question? What does everybody have the 21st and the 22nd of March? That's a Monday and
I'm
Tuesday.
actually out.
Okay.
Oh,
She can't. I tried. I tried.
So if you're
was a
asking
good
for
try.
feedback, I'll give you mine. I think we've unpacked a lot of things here and leaned into the discomfort of the conversation of relationships, of the culture, to stop it short. If I'm gonna get this uncomfortable already, I'd rather just go the whole way and make sure that I have the best shot possible to appropriately serve our community
Yeah.
in the most effective way possible, checking my biases, checking my own approach to serving. So I rather continue it on. Because if in a month or 2 months or 3 months, this breaks down again and we go back into, I don't want to say bad habits, but less than ideal ones, then all of this investment of time and effort was for nothing, including the money that we're obviously spending on, the training. So that would be my perspective. And then having you independently gauge our performance is also going to be imperative, because then as a collective, we'll be able to self-reflect and say, like, we gave ourselves too much grace on that score versus what you, from your perch of observing various systems, does. Right? So that's my approach.
That's fair. And generally, what it would look like is, I would review or watch board meetings, probably not in person, but I might show up every once in a while. And I would review them against the framework. And then we make sure, I would also work with your team to make sure you have the progress reports that you want, and the board's happy with those. And then maybe once a quarter or once every, 4 months, we would do a brush up, right? Like, are we living into this framework? Where are the challenges that are occurring? Do we need a team of 8? Do we need, those kind of things? And, those are not contractual. Those are just as needed too. I mean, I'm here because I really want this board and this district to succeed, and so, I'll do however you want us to deliver, for me to deliver.
Since you've had an opportunity to watch a few of our board meetings and you've seen our agenda, do you think there are perhaps consent items that should not have been in consent but maybe been in discussion? Because we always have a very lengthy list of consent items.
I think there are maybe some that could have been, out, but I don't know what the information was beforehand. I can only see it on the surface, so I don't have all of that.
You mean as far as what information is provided to us by the staff?
Well, or like, how did you discuss the consent items? Where was the feedback? What was the information? If you put it on a consent agenda, then I've got to make the assumption that you know what it is and that it's kind of a given.
That's not always the case.
So then that's where that agenda item, where that agenda review process could be examined a little more closely.
And that's a session you can lead us through. That's why you recommended that.
And so, this type of, just so you know, most boards that do Lone Star governance and do it well, it takes about 2 years to do it, to really start to lean in the framework. And it's renewing and it's reminding, and once you get a new board member, if you ever got a new board member, it's reactivating, right? It's all of those things. So, so that's been not just my experience, but pretty much any Lone Star governance coach or governance coach that's operating. So it just takes work. It's a different framework, right? We're moving from a different part of the scale to a more balanced piece of that. And there are also opportunities to get some funding for this kind of work from the state. So there's that. You guys can certainly discuss it. And I, obviously, whatever you want, I would love to be able to continue to work through this whole framework. But I definitely need to get us to a monitoring.
The educational equity piece, is that something that you need us for, or is that something that you can do, like, in conjunction with the district?
I think that it starts with an audit. We can, I can lead you through the board part of it, but if it's specific, like individual equity work, if you're talking about that, then I would not take that as a lead. I can recommend. But I'm not sure I've seen that in this boardroom, but.
I'm more so meant for the system-wide audit to
Like the
determine.
system-wide audit, I think is a really important thing. There's some really cool, like the student piece that I can recommend, and the equity audits I can recommend, how we work through that. And there's some really interesting ways to do that. And there's actually some really good folks in San Antonio that can help with that, too. So, those are all things that we can bring, we can talk, I can give you resources, and I can lead in some. Fair enough? Okay.
Is that a
Thank you.
conversation we're gonna have, like, as a whole board, or how do we determine? More so.
It's up to you. I mean, I do think you
Okay.
need to discuss it as
Sure.
a board. I am, at the service of you guys.
I think we would need to, whatever the will of the board is.
Is there any expectation of me on that part to do anything, just so I don't drop the ball on it?
I think.
I don't think so.
I think we have to
it as an
decide.
agenda item for next session. Question.
I would ask that for us to finish the Lone Star governance piece, so the certification goes to the state, that we have at least one more session.
And I need that for the SGS, right?
Yeah.
That's just 3 hours more, if I can get that in, to get the monitoring process.
Is it possible to do a virtual? Because that might like open up some, no?
Not allowed.
But,
I mean, the state doesn't
somebody
allow.
was.
Right, no, I understand.
I mean, I think we're all in agreement that we need to finish this up.
Yeah.
pretty
Yeah.
quick,
Yeah, oh, definitely,
Yeah.
Right?
most
And
definitely.
then for us to decide our next steps, I'm looking at both of you and you, that goes on the next agenda? For us to discuss it?
The next board meeting?
Will we be ready at that time?
We
I mean,
gotta
will
finish
you
this
have-
part first.
But we don't need to finish this to talk about our continued
How
work
about,
with that.
But here's the only thing that I'm questioning, is having a facilitator. Do we need to have a facilitator? Is that what you're asking? Or are we just going to, as a board, decide what goes on the agenda? You fill out the form, put it on the agenda, and we work it that
What
way?
I'm specifically asking is, do we have an agenda item next time for us to decide, do we go
The next
into
steps.
phase 2 on the training? And I don't think we need a facilitator for that,
Just to put it on the agenda that we are continuing with?
for us to discuss if we decide if we are or aren't.
Then it would, yeah, we would have to put it on the.
And forgive me, Rob, but I thought we could just move forward as a continuation. I didn't know we needed to put it on the
But
agenda.
I guess that's my question.
Yeah, we just
Yeah.
continue.
Can we
None
get a
of this has been
consensus?
on the
We can get a
agenda.
consensus now, right? That whether we want to move forward
None of
with
this has been
more.
on the
I say
agenda.
yes, we do
Yeah.
move
We didn't
forward.
vote on any of this.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I
It's
didn't
just
hear
drink.
anyone say no.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's saying we're going to
Okay,
stop after the 3 hours.
I just took silence as we want to talk about it somewhere else, but
Oh, no,
we're
I
good to.
Oh, no,
Yeah,
we
we
want
might
to
as well-
do,
might
we
as
want to
well-
finish.
Yeah.
We just having trouble coming up with a date.
Yeah, like I said, I thought this was it, but I'll.
For sure the 3 hours,
I'll
and
do a
probably,
couple
I think we need, I'm hearing
The other
concerns
pieces of it.
about agenda review, and we
Right.
need to, we need
And I do
to
want
work
to
on that.
revisit that
That
idea that you had.
What I can do is get, the 3 hours is there. I
Mhm.
gotta do that. But what I'll do is I'll build a scope
Okay.
for like phase 2.
There we go.
And then
That
you
would be
can
great.
Yeah.
discuss it.
And then we can
Yeah,
pick and
that would
choose
be
on
nice.
that. Okay.
Yeah.
The only reason it might go on the agenda, because I'd have to go back and
Look at the contract.
the contract that we approved in the amount. So that might be the only reason that it might have to go on the agenda. I think we had approved 20,000.
Yeah.
And if we do another 20, well, then that stays under the 50,
Yeah.
but if we do more,
Mm-hmm.
it
would
depends
have to
what
go
she
back.
tells me what the
Right.
But the scope, yeah, of course. But not for the next session, though.
Right, not for the 3 hours.
No, that's already.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, we're good.
So my follow-up is going to be that Patricia will send me some dates, we'll check it with the district calendar to make sure there's no events, and then sometime Betty will call y'all and say which one of these dates possibly works after spring break.
And, yeah, after spring break, like, Saturdays can generally work for me, other than a few of them.
Yeah, just, I
But-
would be okay with a Saturday.
I would
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
The only Saturday I know is not good for me is the last Saturday in this month. I'm doing a wedding.
Saturdays in general.
Getting married?
No, I perform weddings.
Are we ready?
Well,
to
if there's
adjourn?
no other business to discuss, the time is 9:05 and this meeting is adjourned.